The following is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network.
This is Speedball Mike Bailey. You're listening to Keepin' It Strong Style. Yosh.
Yo, this is Rich Latta from One Nation Radio. This is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network. We present to you the Ace of Podcasts, Keeping It Strong Style. Let's go. It's the Ace of Podcasts, Keeping It Strong Style. Covering New Japan, they ready to hold it down. Jeremy Donovan and the young boy Josh. Come and hit a job out in Barrio the Frogs. From the Tokyo Dome over to the G1. Social Suplex is the network where we can get it done. I'ma chill and let them have it, cause this is just an intro. Keeping the strong style, 6 stars from the get-go, boy. Yeah, from Tampa Bay to the Tokyo Dome, this is Keeping It Strong Style with your hosts, Jeremy Donovan and the young boy Joshua Smith. And thank you for listening.
Welcome to Keeping It Strong Style, the ASA podcast on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. Jeremy Donovan here with the young boy Josh Smith. On today's show, we will be handing out our final grades for all 20 competitors from G1 Climax 36, discussing the announcements for Battle on Kaido and Destruction in Kobe, and covering all this news in the world of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Please support our show by subscribing and following the Social Suplex Podcast Network and Keeping a Strong Style on the podcast app of your choice, and leaving a rating and review. You can also get all the network's podcasts and newsletter over at socialsuplex.com. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider making a one-time or monthly donation by visiting socialsuplex.com/donate and click on the donate button under the Keeping It Strong Style logo. And we are streaming live right now on patreon.com/KI Strong Style. If you want to watch our show live or listen without ads, you can sign up at patreon.com/KI Strong Style. Young boy, how you doing, man?
I'm doing so well. I'm happy to be back. It's been good after the, we love the G1 Climax. We love that period of time. One of the most exciting periods in the entirety of the calendar year. But once you get past that, how many weeks is it? Like 7 weeks essentially of professional wrestling.
Something like that.
Not that I'm complaining, mind you, but it's nice to have a little bit of a reprieve such as we've had here. And it's nice to, do a little bit of a retrospective as we jump into the next phase of the calendar year.
Yeah, the break has been a nice little reset. Left us off with a high, off wanting more. But yeah, definitely good to get back together and kind of give our final thoughts on G1 and kind of look ahead to what's to come.
Absolutely. And we're going to give our grades here. I also think we would be remiss if we didn't mention, just bullet points about some of those final matches that we didn't really get a lot of time to devote to last week. But looking forward to it. Before we jump into anything, what's new in the world of Jeremy Donovan right now?
Not a whole lot. I mean, turned 37 last week.
Oof.
I mean, that's pretty
Big
much
oof.
been it. Nothing else has been going on over here.
Have the aches started to set in?
Oh yeah, been setting in.
the knees are gone.
Yeah.
The back is cracking. The fucking hair's receding. Nah, you look great.
all those bumps I was taking on the mats back in the day, it's starting to catch up.
Bro, every now and again I will throw on some Global Underground Wrestling to watch His Majesty John Juris. We were actually a couple, I never told you this, well, I might have mentioned it, but a few months back, my niece, who I am in fact her favorite uncle, she had a birthday party, and it was at this gymnasium, or like not a gymnasium, is that a gymnastics place, which I was excited about, because I was like, fuck yeah, like you guys used to hold GUW at like a at a gymnastics place with the blue mats, the bouncy floors and everything like that. So I was like, fuck yeah, like that's gonna be so much fun. And then I get there and I find out that literally adults are at this party are not allowed to do anything. You can't sign a waiver, so I was thinking I was gonna be out there like playing with the kids and all that. My wife was like, you're not going to be out there playing with the kids. Like, what the fuck's wrong with you? And I was like, well, then why are we here? Like literally, like they got the children out there and they're running them. And here's the funny thing is like 95% of these kids don't do gymnastics. It's like a gimmick. It's just like you come in and, they sit them down and they might have them like do a couple like toe touches and forward tumbles. But most of they just have like a giant playground of like shit that they can climb on and jump off and all these like little, foam pits and everything like that. But I'm like, these kids aren't even really doing gymnastics. I was like, I could be out there. I could do a cartwheel. I could take a flat back bump. I could do something. And my wife's like, you can't do shit. Like, and I was like, you don't know. You never see me roll. I could do it.
Ethan Taylor Jr. saying you could pass off as being 17.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't let us. And then here's the thing is like, all right, so then you've got all these, I'm not a parent. I'm there as the uncle. Got a few family friends, people I know. 90% of the people there are moms who are, or like dads, but like, the parents of the children that I've never known, never interacted with. And I can't really be bothered to get to know these people that I'm never going to interact with another day in my entire life.
Right.
So it's just us sitting on these like hardwood, like benches behind glass, just watching the kids do their thing. And I'm like, for the kids, great party. For us, and I'm a big believer in children's parties being for both the adults and the kids. That's just my way of, I grew up, Hispanic. Most of the kids' parties are really for the adults anyways. And, we're just sitting there watching them. I'm like, this is the most boring party I've ever been to. They won't even let me go in there and bounce on the blue mats. But I said all that to say this. I was inspired by GUW because you guys were out there, jumping off the giant foam pads, taking bumps. And if you guys have never seen John Juris, actually, it's not easy to find that shit. Like, you have to kind of know how to find it, but it's out there.
Yeah, I mean, if you type in John Juris, JONJURIS, a lot of the videos will come up, or if you search GUW09 is one of the channels. There's RXW08. Those are like two of the YouTube channels that have a lot of our videos on there.
Which one does Josiah Schaefer run?
So, I mean, it was like RXW when he was, quote unquote, the booker at the time was when.
Is that his YouTube channel?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I say that to say this. Let me put you guys on to a classic. One of the greatest.
I already know.
I don't go much for intergender most days. But if you had to ask me what's the greatest intergender match I've ever seen, if you look up, what did you say it was, RXW?
Yeah, RXW08. I think it's on that channel. Or if you just type in Sick Nick versus Jade.
You can look, but it's not easy to find. But if you go to the RXW08 YouTube channel and then you want to scroll and you want to find one that says Sick Nick versus Jade, bro, Jeremy and his friends that were running this promotion, they allowed the teensiest, tiniest girl you've ever seen with no training. None of them had any real training, but no training whatsoever to come out there and wrestle a grown man. And how tall is Sick Nick, by the way?
I would say like, I don't know, 6'2", something like that.
Okay, so he's my size.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, about your size, yeah.
This girl's easily like 5'2". There's like a foot difference between the two of them. She knows no wrestling moves whatsoever except for chop, kick to the stomach, and DDT.
Hey, keeping it simple, you don't need all the flashy stuff. Just a few.
You guys should have
moves.
At least taught her like a headlock takeover or like a a wrist lock, but she didn't have that much. But bro, the bumps that this girl takes, they're some of the crazy. The only reason I can find enjoyment out of this is because I know that A, it was consensual. B, everybody that participated was completely safe and fine and living their life and they're happy and everything's okay. And with that knowledge, but if you watch this, you will think, oh my God, this dude is murdering. He's like Alabama fucking slamming this girl, and he's putting her all the way up in the air and choke slamming her, and she doesn't know how to take a bump, so she's like just following. Like, you ever seen those when you're passing by like a store opening or like a new car dealership, and they have
the Bailey wacky inflatable.
Yeah, they have the inflatables that are just flying in the wind. Bro, I swear to God, that's what she looks like taking bumps. I've never met this girl. She doesn't know we're talking about her on this podcast. I'll probably never interact with her, but she put on one of the greatest showings of heart and determination. I think it's like a 9-minute match. She takes like 4 or 5 of the sickest bumps I've ever seen in my life. Do yourself a favor and go find... We might put it in the Discord. Yeah. That's how much I love it.
Yeah, we can throw a link in the Discord. Maybe we'll even tweet it out. That's that's probably one of the craziest matches we put on. Shout out to my girl Maite. That's a shoot name. Yeah, she wanted to wrestle with us. She didn't want to just be a valet or manager. She didn't want to be the backstage reporter. She wanted to get in there, do the graps, and so like, all right, well. We got a great first test for you.
So she was like, a fan of ECW in the late 90s, and she heard about jazz. She's like, I could be jazz, but I'll change it, Jade.
Yeah, I don't know if she was a big jazz fan. I think she was more Lita inspired by, but yeah. So,
boy, well, you would think she was a Dynamite Kid or like a. Or a Mick Foley fan, the way she's fucking dying out there. It's the craziest. Lita's never taken a bump like Jade does against Sick Nick. It's the best.
Yeah. Oh, man. Good old GUW.
Yeah, if you guys haven't caught GUW, it's definitely... These guys would wrestle. They didn't even have a ring. They wrestled on like gymnastic. Later, you guys did have a ring, but in the beginning, most of the life of it's a backyard promotion. It's just... gymnastics floor with like the blue mats. It actually looks like bumping on that wasn't really that bad whatsoever. I'd have to assume.
Yeah, and for the most part, all of us had some amateur wrestling background, so we kind of knew how to fall somewhat.
It's not professional.
Yeah.
You guys are doing. If you guys have never seen Jeremy's matches, they're doing some very, very ambitious maneuvers, and they're doing them wholeheartedly. Like, guys are taking sincere bumps, like major moves that only a trained professional should take, but they don't know how to bump. So it's quite something. Jeremy did just step away for a moment, probably to take my dog Jones to his mom. So, I got to fill some space and some time here, but I know that we want to, enough talk about the GUW and the gymnastics, but we're gonna move on here, and it looks like Jeremy is actually returning to the show right now. I was telling them that I didn't have much more to say about GUW, but unless you have a last thing to say, I think we could probably move on to the meat and potatoes of the show.
Yeah, so first thing that we're going to jump into is our G1 Climax report cards. We're going to go through, give our final letter grades, any final thoughts. I know you wanted to talk about some of the matches that we didn't fully able to get into last week. So let's start off in the A block.
Beyond that, Jeremy, before we jump into things, I think you should go ahead and plug the extra content related to this topic that you have put out there on the Patreon this week.
Yeah, so if you're...
And you didn't ask my permission or notify me. It's quite a shock to find out you're going into business for yourself here.
Well, I was trying to get some more content going on the Patreon. Right now, it's just it's hard to do bonus audio. But I was able to, use my phone to kind of just type up some pieces real quick. And so if you've been on the Patreon, you might have noticed a few written pieces have came through on the Patreon. I did release one in the middle of the tournament. That was kind of like a mid-tournament check-in based off of my ratings, the averages for each wrestler. That was free on the free tier, so everybody could see that one. And then I did do a end of the tournament, kind of into the finals, kind of a preview. And then this weekend, I dropped the kind of full standings based off of averages of my star ratings and a little write-up about some of the wrestlers. So both of those last few ones were all paid on the paid tier, on the Young Lion and the Grade 1 tier. So I'm going to try and put out some more written stuff throughout the week to give you guys some more bonus content on the Patreon. But yeah, so check those out. Sometimes I'll drop a freebie, and then other times it will be on the paid tiers. But yeah, so I dropped the full rankings, and I will have a piece coming out later this week that will give you every single match, every star rating that I did for G1.
Sounds great. Well, let's, I'll definitely check that out, and I'm sure the rest of the listeners will also pony up the money required.
Money.
But to check that out. Looking forward to it. But without further ado, let's do our quick recap of and letter grades for this year's G1.
Yep. So let's start in the A block, and we'll start at the top with the actual block winner. He didn't end up winning the tournament, but he is the IWGP Heavyweight Champion. Was A1 in the block, the Gene Blast, Yota Tsuji. Yeah.
Now, as of last week, Yota Tsuji, he picked up a victory on the 12th over Jake Lee on the final night of block action, and then was defeated by Yuya Uemura in the play-ins, which we discussed briefly last week. One thing I will say, the match with Jake Lee, this is just my personal opinion here, Jeremy. I thought that was perhaps the hardest that Jake Lee tried in the tournament, and one of his better showings. And I actually perhaps liked that match. Actually, not perhaps. I like that match quite a bit more than the title match that they had earlier in the year. Mm-hmm. And I think it's another testament to the strength of Yota Tsuji's year, and his generational run through this year's G1 Climax, giving a guy who, was hit and miss and didn't have any super high peaks, but I thought gave Jake Lee one of his best matches of the tournament. Unfortunately, though, we didn't really talk about this too much last week. It seems like Jake Lee, might potentially, I wasn't able to follow up and figure out what the news exactly was, but it seems like he's out with a neck injury. And I couldn't help but notice that he seemed to, I don't know if this was the direct cause, but he took a really nasty bump into the bottom turnbuckle off of the Raging Fire, or not the Raging Fire. What's the
Fire Blaster into the corner?
The Fire Blast. When he got whipped around, he seemed to hit his neck into the bottom turnbuckle. And then, it came out that he's injured and might be out for a period of time. So that seemed to be, I'm assuming a miscalculation. But other than that unfortunate incident, I don't want to gloss over it and say it wasn't, again, this is Jake Lee is a guy who is returning from a prolonged injury and has been plagued. And there's been reports all throughout this tournament that he's been, suffering from quite a few different ailments. But putting that very serious side of it aside, the match itself in terms of the nuts and bolts, I thought it was very good. And another testament to just how good Yota Tsuji's year has been.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on it. I thought it was better than the title match, but I really didn't love it. I wasn't really a whole fan of the whole, put on the clown makeup thing and put it on Tsuji and have Tsuji kind of acting goofy. Like I wasn't really here for all of that. But I was just happy that Tsuji won, because I know there was definitely a spoiler potential there for Jake Lee to beat him, and that could have opened up the door for another title match down the year. It could have made Tsuji potentially not go through. But yeah, I thought the match, it was fine for what it was. And I know I've seen some other people online kind of giving it more flowers than what some others are giving it. But I don't know. I was at that point in the tournament kind of over Jake Lee and all his shenanigans.
Well, don't get me wrong. I'm not recommending the match. I'm not saying anybody should go out of their way to watch it. What I am saying is that this is the Ishii versus Tama Tonga effect, where you have a guy that's the MVP of the tournament. He's wrestling one of the guys that is the lowest performers in the block, and he happens to give him one of his best matches. So I'm not really praising Jake Lee. I'm more so praising the fact that Yota Tsuji was able to elevate him, and that kind of speaks to the strength of Yota Tsuji's tournament. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then after that, Tsuji goes into the semifinals. So he wrestled against Yuya Uemura, one of his career rivals, who didn't really get a touch on this match a lot. And Tsuji came out in the big match gear, no entrance coat, not really a big smile on the face like that he would normally have. And a part of me was wondering if there was maybe a little bit of a boo-boo face there, but maybe it was just, him trying to be serious and get into the finals.
I personally took it as game face. We've seen Yota Tsuji, we've seen him drop his title and he didn't seem to be bothered by it. We've seen him in a lot of situations where he has taken big losses and put people over. And, granted, we as well as others, I don't think we were alone in the idea of speculating maybe this is the time that they create history and push him towards, as the champion, as a G1 finalist or winner. They didn't go that way, but the truth of the matter is they don't go that way. So I don't think it was that surprising or shocking. And I'd be shocked to imagine that he was strongly pushing that he be the one that goes through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I personally didn't take it as boo-boo face. I kind of took it as even though I sort of was hoping he would win the match, I sort of saw we talked about it last week. I saw the writing on the wall, because I was like, oh, they got him in there with 3 Reiwa guys. There's no way, there's no scapegoat. There's no Gabe Kidd. There's no guy that he can defeat to make this plausible. So I believed he was going to lose to Yuya, but yeah, I thought he came in there with the game face, especially considering the history between those two guys.
Yeah, and I thought that match was great. I went 4.5 on it, and these guys we talked about last week, they've had over 50 something singles matches against each other, and clearly it seems like Tsuji has surpassed Yuya Uemura in kayfabe, and I would say even out of kayfabe. And so this was need to be a big win for Yuya, not only to get into the finals, but kind of to try and show that he is on Tsuji's level. Because I feel like throughout their rivalry, since they've both been back from excursion, it seems like Tsuji's gotten the better moments. That they had that hair match earlier on when they both returned, and Tsuji beating him and making him have to shave the head. And so it just seems like, Tsuji is just kind of, been that guy that he's been chasing, and Tsuji's been in G1 finals. He's the champion, he's a semi-main event of the Tokyo Dome, IWGP champion. And so this was kind of a big moment for Yuya to, kind of silence the doubters and prove that he's on Yota Tsuji's level.
Yeah, the kind of interesting thing is, since these guys have returned from excursion, they, like you mentioned, they had 53 singles matches in the entirety of their career, but most of those were as young lions. And when they first returned, though the matches were good, they weren't classics, the hair versus hair, the Wrestle Kingdom match, and yada, it goes on and on. But since then, if you look at cage match, and again, it is just a tool, it's an aggregate, but you look at what they've landed on since they've returned from excursion, and their first match got a 6.93. That's not terrible. Dave gave it 4. Dave's given almost all their matches close to 4 or greater. So he thinks the entire series is great, but they're like in the 6s for the first 3 matches that they've had post excursion. This one lands at 8.82. Dave gave it 4.5. So, incrementally, as time has gone on, as they've been given opportunities for bigger moments and title matches and what have you, the more time they've been given, and as they become more seasoned as professionals, they've had greater matches. One thing I would say is, if you were someone that, like, let's just say parachuted in for the G1 Climax, right? And you just parachuted in for, the finals. Again, we had a lengthy discussion last week about how potentially divisive that match is stylistically. If you're looking for a match from this tournament that was very classical to the quote unquote golden age of New Japan Pro Wrestling, like the 2010s era, this is it. This one fits the bill, fits the mold. It's not far off from the match that Yota Tsuji had with Takeshita at the opener of the G1, and was really like fantastic.
Yeah, and we talked about last week the whole deadbolt suplex deal with Uemura, needing to hit that bridge, and he was able to do that towards the end of this match to get the pin over Tsuji and advance to the finals.
Yeah. Now, with that all being said, Yota Tsuji, he finishes as champion 6-3, 12 points, right at the top of the block. He goes in as A1. I have to give Jeremy, in my opinion, the rare and lofty A+ rating to Yota Tsuji in this tournament. I genuinely believe that Yota Tsuji had a generational run through the course of this tournament. He carried what, in my opinion, is one of the best blocks I've ever seen in the history of our time doing Keeping It Strong Style. He was the MVP of the block. He was the MVP of the tournament. I still believe right now he is. And actually, this bolsters more so than anything else he's done this year his claim and stake to being a Wrestler of the Year candidate. Yota Tsuji was fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Big A+ for the G Blast. Just great. And I think there's been a lot of people that question Tsuji or might not think he's quite the guy, but I don't know. I feel like this tournament really silenced all the doubters. He went out there and had great match after great match. Like, he was, the centerpiece of this block. He went out there, he pretty much had everyone's best match for the most part in the block. Really great main event performances. When he was in the main event, you had some good houses. So yeah, everything just went awesome with Yota Tsuji here. And yeah, I agree with you. MVP of the block, MVP of the tournament. And I know people might be like, well, Oiwa won, he should be the MVP, and we'll get to Oiwa. He had a great tournament, but I feel like Yota Tsuji, when you compare match to match to everybody in his block in the whole tournament, he was just having banger after banger after banger. And I think he really solidified himself as a top guy with this G1 run. And yeah, not only did he also kind of solidify himself as a Keeping a Strong Style Awards Wrestler of the Year, I think he has a great argument for worldwide Wrestler of the Year. Any of your, Observer polls or any other these other, publications that are doing their Wrestler of the Year award. To me, I was actually, looking through cage match this weekend, trying to think, who else, has this solid beginning to end year where you go like, these guys are the Wrestler of the Year. And also, there are guys like Ospreay and Omega and MJF and stuff like that who've had really great matches throughout the year. But when you look from like the whole concisive year, like I feel like those guys have kind of peaked in certain months or even certain quarters. But you go back to January, essentially you go January 4th to now, Tsuji's year has been excellent. From that semi-main event against Takeshita all the way to this last G1 match against Shinya Uemura. And throughout that year, you got the Andrade matches, you got the Newman matches, he's bringing the V4 back. Like, there's just so much that has happened in this last year for Yota Tsuji, I feel like you cannot ignore him for your Wrestler of the Year worldwide.
Well, I was making that claim when the tournament started, just off the back of the work he'd done pre-G1 plus the match with Takeshita. And, once we got out of the show, I started thinking a little further about that. And I was like, I think he's in the conversation. At the time, I felt confident about it. But then I started looking at Cage Match and I started thinking a little further on that. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I'm a little premature here. There's a lot of really, really great work with some of the top guys in AEW and some of the top girls and say Stardom, things like that. But as the old adage goes, you can't really have the discussion about Wrestler of the Year until the G1 Climax happens. Mm-hmm. And I think he has separated himself from the pack. Of course, that's the luxury and the advantage of working a tournament like this, but it's been many years since someone has really made the most of the opportunity given to them here. And again, generational run.
Yeah. So next, let's talk about the G1 Climax winner, the Grip, Roy Oiwa. So he will see the A2 in the block, finished with 12 points in the tournament stage. What you got on the Grip, Josh?
Yeah, so Oiwa, he defeated Takeshita on the final night of block play. That was the main event that evening. And then, of course, went through to defeat Callum Newman in the play-ins and then was the G1 Climax winner in a generational match. Last week, we were going through some of the questions and people asked us about who was the most elevated in this tournament. And, sometimes when we get those questions, you try to, especially when time is elapsing and you're trying to jet through the show, I was kind of racking my brain. I'm sure we did mention him, but I think it's hard to, I think it was a little understated just how ballsy and impressive, not only his showing in the tournament, but also the decision from the booking team, the committee and creative were to go with this guy. And these matches to close out the tournament were just phenomenal. I thought that he gave Callum what is perhaps Callum's best match of the entire tournament. Him and Takeshita have a special kind of chemistry that, Takeshita is great and he's had great matches with lots of people, but I thought him and Oiwa, they tore the house down in the main event there. Mm-hmm. And then of course, the final of the G1 Climax. For me, I'm going with an A. I don't think that Oiwa was on every single night of the tournament, but I also believe that that's simply because he wasn't put in a position to be on every night. There were times earlier on in the tournament where he was the first or the second block match of the evening and given sub 15 minutes, usually in the 10 to 12 range. And in those situations, depending on who he's wrestling, especially if it's Jake Lee or Great O'Khan, the match was what it was. But when he was put higher up on the card and given the opportunity to run with the ball, he knocked it out of the park every single time. I think he's a low floor, high ceiling performer. Maybe I don't think he had the same run perhaps as Yota Tsuji, but I thought that he delivered in spades.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm probably going maybe B plus. So kind of close to the range of where you're at, but yeah, he had a very good tournament, and kind of like you're saying, part of maybe why he wasn't as high was the way he was positioned. Even though he did have a few more semi-main events and main events, that first night he had that semi-main event with Bolton, which it was a very good match, but not kind of your blow-away standout match. But yeah, throughout the tournament, he had very, good to great matches, and he was a guy that peaked at the end. Going into those last few matches, he had the Takeshita match, rocked. Then he goes into the Newman match that rocked, and then also he goes into the G1 finals. So I feel like he pulled out 3 in a row. He had the clip loaded up with just 3 bangers back to back to back. And so yeah, peaking very high at the end, which is what you kind of want to do in a tournament like this if you're kind of booked to be in the middle of the card. I think when you have the opportunities to kind of go out strong, I think he did an excellent job in the last 3 outings.
It is interesting now that you mention it, the fact that he opened the tournament with a shock submission over, rival generational guy, Oleg Boltin. And then he closes out the tournament the same way against Yuya Uemura. I hadn't thought of that till you mentioned it, but that's pretty interesting. For me, I think probably the biggest difference between you and me probably has to do with being live in the building and maybe being perhaps a little bit higher on the Oleg Boltin match than others were. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's blowaway, but I do feel like I got more out of that match there live in the building than others did. So that might also be one reason, because I think we fall squarely in the same place when it comes to stuff like, him and say Shingo,
Yeah. So anything else on Oiwa?
Just again, guy played into the tournament. First time someone that's played in won the tournament. Huge hill to climb, defeating last year's winner in Takeshita. And that's another match that I feel like, I don't have the full rundown on what occurred in that match, but it's sitting at an 8.64. The match with Callum sitting at an 8.21. And then, of course, the some people might disagree with this, but the G1 final, again, it's sitting at a 9.64. So that is as strong as a run as you could ask for from a final 3 days of a tournament performer. And again, that's why I've given him an A here. Just so impressed, not only with all of that, but also the connection that he's made with the audience through the course of this tournament.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about next the Alpha, the NJPW World TV Champion Konosuke Takeshita, also ended at 12 points. And we kind of been talking about Takeshita, kind of having this kind of sneaky tournament, despite obviously, being a top guy, and he was in the semi-main event at the Dome. He wasn't really positioned in a lot of main events and semi-main events in this tournament. And with being a TV champion, and we pointed out he was having a lot of 15-minute-esque time-minute matches in this tournament. So not probably given the time to fully go out and have maybe some epics that he might have had in the past. But I think he was a sneaky good component of this block.
He was certainly one of the best performers in a fantastic block. I'm looking at, again, just to kind of keep track of everything, I'm looking at his cage match. I'm seeing a lot of green, a lot of 8s, except for the Great Okan match. And then, this is a guy that the day before the Oiwa match, he worked Kaisei Takechi over in DDT, which is kind of fucking insane considering the schedule that they keep, kayfabe or not. He did lose to Oiwa going into the final night of the block action. For me, I'm going to say B+ on Takeshita. I don't really have any complaints other than there were quite a few times where he wasn't main eventing. So I don't always feel like we were maximizing what he was capable of doing out there. Mm-hmm. All the same, he was still performing to an extremely high level, even on, say, like the undercards. Like, for instance, a match like the match against on night 4 against like Yuto Ice. That's like the third match from the top. And they go out there and kill it over a 12-minute time period. That was one that I just really, really, really enjoyed. I think I'm a little bit higher than others were on it, but I think that's a prime example of like, was that match in and of itself a classic where you're like, oh my God, this is going to be on the highlight reel for Takeshita for years to come? No. But when you look at the totality of like his G1 Climax output, those nights where you want to take a look and be like, okay, this is the best of what I hope from a New Japan show or from like a G1 Climax night, where you're hoping that the guys on the underneath come and bring it just as much as like the semi and the main. He was often doing that. And I mean, I guess if you were grading on a curve, considering how few main events and how few semis he had, he really outkicked his coverage here. I mean, it's no shock considering it is Takeshita, but just a stellar performer.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. Potentially I could be convinced maybe A-, but yeah, I think I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go B+. For all the reasons you were mentioning. Also, I think he peaked very high early with the first match of the night with the match against Tsuji in Chicago. I love that match. That was the only 5-star match I gave for the whole tournament, and I felt that he kind of solidified himself and kind of his run with that one match. But then throughout the other matches in the tournament, he was kind of third match out of the 5 or kind of the first of the 5, and so he didn't have a ton of main events or semi-main events throughout the rest of the tournament. But yeah, it's still a really great tournament, very good action, one of the best performers in the whole block. So yeah, I think it's an easy B+ for me. And again, could be convinced A- and probably would have gotten in that A range had he had more main events and kind of been featured a little bit more. But I thought that what they're trying to do and getting him over with the New Japan fans, I think worked with kind of having him a little bit more on the back burner and allowing some of the other Reiwa guys to shine here. Well, next up, we're going to look at Boltin Oleg. So he ended the block with 10 points. I thought Boltin had a very good G1, another guy that was positioned a little bit higher than they were previously. Again, that semi-main event in the first night with Oiwa, and then having some other big moments throughout the tournament, having that big matchup against Tsuji in Cork and Hall, getting the big win there. So yeah, I thought Boltin looked really good in this G1.
Yeah, I mean, Oleg Boltin was, other than Oiwa, probably the most elevated young, Reiwa guy, perhaps through the course of the tournament. I guess you could probably make the argument for Uemura, but he's kind of had some, some pushes and some opportunities, whereas Oleg Boltin has not really been utilized to this capacity up to this point. Looking back, when we saw that they were semi-main eventing the show in Chicago to open up the tournament, people were very surprised by it. And then you look back now, and in hindsight, you see the elevation of both of those competitors. It sort of seems that there was a rhyme and reason behind all of it. Mm-hmm. So much so that, last year, Oleg was pretty high in the block. He definitely has always had his supporters and people that have wanted to see him succeed. So it's not like there wasn't voices out there saying like, oh, we want to see him, get an opportunity for the play-in rounds. But this year, as opposed to last year, was where people were like, holy shit, he's had such a phenomenal run. There were people like, he has to go through. Like they were like adamant that he be one of the guys that makes it into that play-in round. Unfortunately, that's not the way, the cookie crumbled for him. But I really thought that he was stellar. He had some fantastic matches. I thought it was on the final night, he had great Okan. And Okan's tournament has just fucking sucked. The count out finish was really not to my liking. That being said, I did think personally that was one of the most like effort driven performances that Great Okan, even though the match it's sitting at like a 3.4, and I could totally understand why. You and I were calling at the time that would probably be some sort of upset, but I felt like that was a match where Okan tried finally through the course of the tournament. And I thought Oleg, perhaps in my opinion, might have given him his best match of the tournament, even in defeat. I would give him a B through the course of this tournament, which, considering how good the block has been, that's a really high grade.
Yeah, I'm right along there with you. I'm going flat B for him. And really good. And I think, he's been doing what we wanted to see and really progressing his matches. You know, he's graduated from having that cookie cutter template that he had his first G1 to where he's going out here and having some really, you know, variations of matches, really great main events. So yeah, Bolton's look really good, and so I'm really excited for, you know, him in future G1s, just him in general as a talent.
And we can't, you know, forget the fact, I don't know if it's going to result in anything, but he holds a victory over the current reigning IWGP heavyweight champion, which was, you know, the best match that he had in his career and in this tournament. And you consider that matches like the ones he had with Takeshita, he was just awesome.
Yeah. So up next, we got Hiroki Goto, who finished his tournament with 8 points.
Yeah, his final match was the match with Yuto Ice, which we talked a bit about that last week. You know, for me, Goto, it's tough because on the one hand, I felt like Hiroki Goto, he played a role, and I think he fulfilled that role. And I feel like he did have some matches that were, you know, borderline great. The match with Tsuji, where he, you know, defeated him, stands out in particular as probably his best outing and kind of showcased that he is still capable of, you know, performing at that top level. The match with Takeshita, and you're going to notice for a lot of these guys, we're going to talk about Tsuji and Takeshita giving them their best matches of the tournament. So that's, again, another testament to why we gave them such high scores earlier. I didn't love the Yuto Ice match. I felt like most of his matches with younger guys like Yuto Ice, Oleg Bolton, Oiwa, those were matches where you kind of wanted to see perhaps more, and you kind of didn't. I'm not saying that there isn't still perhaps money in a match down the line with those younger generation guys, but given where he finished in the points and the fact that he was eliminated so early, and, you know, we talked about that this seems to be some sort of decline in terms of like where he stands in the hierarchy. It was a very kind of, I wouldn't say he had a bad tournament, but it wasn't a very good tournament either. It was very hit and miss. He had a couple great matches, but he had quite a few mediocre outings. And then kind of, you also have to factor in the Great Okan and the Jake Lee if at all. Those were pretty bad.
Yeah.
So I'd probably go C for Goto.
Yeah, I was going to say C+.
Yeah. You know, C+ is probably more fitting just considering he did, in fact, have some great classic matches, but it was few and far between.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, everybody had the Jake Lee and Great Okan tax, so yeah, we got those. But then, like you mentioned, some of those young guy matches, for whatever reason, just didn't click, and you would think, you know, especially like the Bolton match or even the Oiwa match would, you know, be something to kind of sink your teeth into, and it was just, you know, the old, I think it's Brian Alvarez, the old two professional wrestlers having a professional wrestling match. Like it was just a match. Like there was nothing wrong with it, nothing special with it either. And so,
yeah.
Also, you know, probably one of his best matches was the match against Tsuji, where he won that match, which is giving him a title shot coming up here next month. So yeah, I think, you know, again, good hand to block, but coming off of Goto Mania running wild, you know, it kind of had higher hopes. And again, it just makes me think, man, what could we have seen had he not been hurt / been filming Street Fighter? If he had been in that G1 last year, I feel like he missed out on a peak G1 run, and it's kind of back to what, you know, where he was kind of heading previous of that title match, of the title run.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, who knows? I mean, we've seen it in the past where as guys age, they have to get a little more selective about when they decide to go all out, because there are only so many great matches. With, you know, a great match is going to be usually longer, or if it's not longer, it's going to be very intensive and physically demanding. And who knows how many of those Goto still has in his system long term. And it's sort of like, you're going to go out there, you're going to have the great match with the champion, especially since you're beating him and you're setting up a program for, the following month or, the month after. But then for the remainder of the tournament, you take the gas off the gas pedal because maybe it's not really needed and it's not about, it's not really your story for that tournament. So we as fans, of course, we want to see the Goto of old, the G and G1 stands for Goto, and this guy to go out there and kill it every night. But he might be, he perhaps is being a little more selective about when and how he goes out there and, fills up the bump card.
Yeah.
Which might not be the worst decision for him as a professional. I mean, we don't like to see it, but, I have to imagine that there's some self-preservation going on there.
Right, especially, as retirements are seeming to be coming one after another, and, somebody in his era in Tanahashi is already retired. So, yeah, I think preserving himself as long as possible, as long as he wants to go, it's a smart move.
It's a physical style that they work, and, Tanahashi debuted in 99. Goto is like class of 02 in terms of like, I know he didn't debut at that point, but that's like when he entered the dojo system. Mm-hmm. So, we're talking about like 24 years of, that's quite a while.
24 years is biz. Well, next up, let's talk about the Rampage Dragon Shingo Takagi also ending his G1 campaign at 8 points.
The final match with Sonata, two guys that were already eliminated, and Sonata sort of like evening up the odds there. That was what it was. But Shingo had a really fantastic tournament. I thought the match with Yuta Weiss even was a little unheralded. I thought it was much better than people gave it credit for. He had, classics with Takeshita and the match with Yota Tsuji. The match with Oiwa also stands out. And then he did, even if they weren't classics, he had very good matches with like Oleg Boltin and a few others. So I felt like, was it an all-time tournament run for him? No. Early on, when the tournament first started, though, we were kind of holding him up as like one of the very best performers in the block. Mm-hmm. Again, he's going to be snake bitten by, it almost feels like the litmus test in this tournament isn't just based on how did you do with the young guys, how did you do with the vets, but it's like, how did you do with Great O'Con and Jake Lee? And that's sort of like where the rubber meets the road. But all in all, I thought that he, if you're kind of comparing him to say a Goto, I don't know personally, and there's going to be people that disagree with this because I've seen some people that have held up the matches with Tsuji and with Takeshita on his ledger, as well as like the Oiwa match as being, some of the best matches of the tournament. I don't personally agree with that, but I think if you he's in a similar position right now to where Goto is, and if you kind of compare the two tournaments between them, I think I much prefer the output that Shingo put out. It's not a generational run like we used to see from him. In the past, there would be those nights where you'd get him and Ishii in the middle of the card and you're like, oh my God, a barn burner. And they just fucking tear the house down. It wasn't like that. Mm-hmm. But I'd probably go B- with Shingo.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm going to go B+ on Shingo. Also, I think in years past, he would probably, moonwalk himself to an A. But I think he had some really great matches in this tournament. And, you might not see it based off the point total and kind of where he was in kayfabe. But yeah, I thought, the Tsuji match was great. The Takeshita match, he had one of the best Bolton matches. The Yuto Ice match. I feel like pretty much everything he did outside of the Jake Lee and Great Contacts was, very, very good to great. And even though he had to kind of pull a come from behind and was pretty much eliminated going into the last few nights, I still think he had a really great tournament. And yeah, I would put him, definitely a notch ahead of Goto, where, Goto, kind of had some slower nights and some simpler nights where I felt like for the most part, outside of, like Sonata, Jake Lee, Great O'Con, I felt like Shingo had the working boots on pretty much every night.
You felt like he was on, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, next up, let's talk about the Pro Wrestling High. Yuto Ice also finishing his G1 with 8 points.
Yuto Ice is a little bit more kind of intangible in a certain sense, because I think if you're just strictly grading, just like, let's say, off of your personal point totals for him, what you see on paper might not tell the full story of his tournament.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have a ton of high profile spots in the tournament. The point total obviously was lacking, and he had a kind of an underdog story of getting stopped in quite a few of his contests. But with that being said, I feel like the story of success that he had was garnering immense sympathy from the audience, while still kind of embodying the idea of like fighting spirit and physicality throughout the course of the tournament, and had so much crowd support no matter where he was up and down the card. And the engagement, the reactions from the audience, the excitement for his matches. And I do think that for me personally, a lot of what Yuto Ice does out there night after night, even if they aren't, say, match of the night necessarily, it's always a treat. It's always something I look forward to. It's always something like, where you feel like the temperature is rising and the excitement level is there, and you're like, all right, let's fucking lock in, because Yuto Ice is going out there, and he's about to have a fucking war with somebody and see like the real man's match, because of those reasons. And I know it sounds like I'm kind of covering for him not having great matches. He did have great matches. It's just a lot of it was lower on the card, less time, and kind of, it followed a path of him getting his ass beat and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I still found his tournament like so enjoyable. Were there some people would disagree. Some people really, of course, I was a low man on the chop match with Yota Tsuji.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for many people, that's the match that they're going to be pointing to as like the standout match for him. For me, it's probably going to be more like the Oiwa match. That's probably the one that I hold up as being his, match of the tournament. But with all that being said, I got to go B on Yuto Ice, which I feel like for a first time ever G1, and especially considering some of the limitations, I feel like that is stellar for him.
Yeah, I'm also going to go a flat B on Yuto Ice, and it's for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. And yeah, I feel like it was almost quote unquote more of a story tournament for him, and it was all about him just going out there chasing the pro wrestling high, and he's getting knocked out every night chasing this pro wrestling high. But yeah, he has the crowd in the palm of his hand. There was always this energy and excitement, no matter what city, whether it was Chicago, or you're going down into night 13, or you're in their dog days of the G1. Like, there was always some excitement and energy when his music hit and he was coming out there. And so, yeah, I thought he had a very good G1. And, I'm pro chop match. I love the chop match. I have it as one of my top matches of the tournament. And I was happy to see Chris Slings of Wrestling Art here on the network was very high on that match as well, and it's going to be one of his.
You don't know shit. You don't know shit. Nobody, anyone that disagrees with my wrestling opinion, they don't know wrestling.
So yeah, it's going to be one of his match of the week things that he does on his podcast, and he did an art drawing for that. So yeah, I loved that match. Thought it was a great match, and so, but yeah, overall, I thought Yuto Ice had a very good tournament. But like you mentioned, it was kind of a lot of story heavy. Also, earlier on in the card, Could it have been different had he had more main events? Could have been different had the Tsuji match not been as polarizing? Probably. And again, it's only his first G1, and I think another story they told was he's an excellent tag guy, but there's a lot for him to learn in the singles role. And so I think the more G1s he does, it's going to get better and better. So yeah, flat B for Yuto Ice. Then we got the Cold-Blooded Snake Sonata, also ending his G1 with 8 points.
Sonata is a really, really interesting one because, you know, in terms of comparison to everybody else that we have discussed just now, in terms of just flat work rate, and overall match, like performance output, I think he's lower than all of those guys. The standout match for him is going to be his win over Yota Tsuji, which was unexpected. Mm-hmm. But again, I think he is similar in some respects to Yuto Ice in that just looking at, you know, say like, for instance, I'm not sure where he landed for you for average, like your personal star ratings. I'm sure I'll just take a stab in the dark. It's probably like in the 3.5-ish sort of range.
For Yuto Ice, you said?
No, for Sonata.
I got Sonata at 2.97.
Oh, wow. That's a little lower than I expected. But, you know, that kind of makes sense because he didn't have a lot of like really great classics. And then if you kind of factor in some of those snoozer matches with some of the lower guys, that brings the average down. I could kind of see that making sense. I would probably personally have him closer to like 3.25. But again, just looking that on paper doesn't tell the full story of what happened here. I think that he has a similar trajectory to Yuto Ice in that the audience was supremely invested in this story that they're telling with Sonata. And, you know, for weeks, you and I had kind of come on here talking about, we don't, you know, kind of confused a little bit. Like, all right, he's with the War Dogs, but he is sort of like, torture. I'm sorry. Forgive me. He's been with so many different groups. And to me, the War Dogs still are House of Torture, and they are still all Bullet Club, basically. Especially considering some of the reports I've heard from AEW. I mean, War Dogs and House of Torture might as well be the same shit. Maybe not the same tactics, but the output's not there from what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Chain match in the bin. Oh man. No, but yeah, it's like, you know, he's House of Torture, but he's not really repping House of Torture too much. I know that there was some interaction with like him and Kanemaru, but it's like you know, he's wearing like the big, you know, the gold disco suits. The crowd is really into it. But ultimately, I think what the story of his tournament really came down to was two things. It was a crisis of identity and also a crisis of his own, like, you know, entropy, you know, the fact that his body is shutting down and he's getting to a point where he's trying to be the performer that he was, you know, remember all the years that you and I talked about, and we got a message here from Rich.
Yeah, he said, can we send Dave Finley back? P.S. I was right. He's a bum, LOL.
Well, I'd be fine with David Finley coming back. He was always good here. But yeah, for years, you know, you and I would talk about Sonata. We're like, hey, he doesn't, you know, there's holes there. There's things that are missing, but physically he's as gifted as any other wrestler in the world on any night. He can be as good as anybody else if he's motivated and he has the right dance partner. But now that his body has broken down, he can't do that. And they've worked that not only into the fact of like his performances aren't as good, but like it's actually worked into the kayfabe and the character in the story where he's like, okay, I'm going to try and turn it on when I can. You know, it's like he's wrestling like an old man Logic. He's like, you know, there's times where I can't, like he's trying to moneyball his way into winning the G1 Climax, and he's picking and choosing the times to turn it on because he physically can't go. But then there's also the fact that even when he tries to turn it on to the best of his ability, he still doesn't have the goods to get the job done. And that's where he has this crisis of identity, because where he's like, I want to be the Sonata of old, but I'm not as good as I used to be. So now sometimes I have to like cut corners and still try and find a way to like overcome.
Right. Hold his guitar.
Deep down, he wants, at this point, Sonata, I think he's like a man wrestling with regret who's like, I could have been great once upon a time and I fucking like floundered it. They gave me this run. It didn't work out. And now my body is, it's breaking down and I'm not what I used to be and I want to be. So now I gotta cut some corners and figure out a way to win. It's sort of like when boxers get out of their prime and, they have to go back to the fundamentals and not only, fundamentals, but they got to go into the bag of like dirty tricks and they got to elbow somebody and step on a foot and like low blow where the referee's not looking. And it's all fair game as long as, they don't get caught. That's and they're not like even a nefarious guy. They're just like, I'm looking for a competitive edge because I know that I can't compete with these young Reiwa guys. And I still want to keep getting the bag. That's where Sonata is.
Yeah. I would give Sonata probably like a flat C. And again, I think you nailed it on the head with what his tournament was. And yeah, there were nights where he went out there, like you mentioned, and had the match against Yota Tsuji where it's like, holy, like this is like one of the top matches of the tournament. Like this guy turned up the clock back and the crowd was behind him. Like it felt like, it felt Sonata of that G1 where he's running through all the young guys. And then also, there are the other matches. He had some short squash matches. There was some shenanigans involved in some of his matches. And so, it wasn't a tournament full of the Tsuji matches. But again, it was more serviceable and more passable than the last two guys we'll talk about. Like I felt like, I don't think I really felt like any Sonata match was like awfully bad. I felt like there was an effort even in like the squash matches or the short matches he had.
So the way I'm looking at it, Jeremy, this is just me personally. B is great. A is like, fantastic. B is great. C is good. I don't think he had a good tournament. I thought he had a very good tournament. And the reason I say that, I don't think that the match output is really there. But I gotta give him that boost for two reasons. Number one, the crowd was life and death with the guy. He got the audience to believe in Sonata again, which is not something I thought could ever possibly happen because I've sat through so many years of apathetic crowds about Sonata, and they believe in him again. So that's number one. Number two, he was moonsaulting.
Shining wizarding.
He was shining wizarding. This was, I'm kind of grading on a curve, sort of the same. Like I sort of graded on a curve with Shingo. Shingo to me is like Shingo had a great tournament, but for Shingo, it wasn't to me the greatest tournament. So I kind of graded down. Sonata was a guy that we thought was going to stink up the tournament. And not only did he not stink up the tournament, he reinvested the audience and tried his fucking hardest. Might not be as good as, I don't think he's capable of doing what Oiwa can do at this point in time. But damn, I did not expect this dude to go high flying. I did not expect this dude to do what he did. So I got to go C+.
Nice. All right. So second to last here, we got the silent gesture, Jake Lee, 3-6, 6 points. One of the low men in the block, not only point total, but I would say match quality, just overall excitement for him in the tournament. And I do think there were nights where he had a little bit more effort, but it was a lot about the clown makeup and his shenanigans.
Except for the nights where he didn't wear the clown makeup, so then it was about not wearing clown makeup.
Right, unless he went under the ring to grab it and put it on mid-match. So, Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it was just kind of a dud of a tournament. I don't know. I think I gotta go like I'm somewhere like D minus F. Yeah, just not a great tournament at all.
For me, I think the Oleg Boltin match stands out as his singular most effort put forth match of the tournament. Probably that and the Yota Tsuji match stand out. And both of them are like probably in the 3-star-ish range. I'm a little torn here. Not that I want to give any credit to. I didn't enjoy Jake Lee's run. I didn't even think he should be in the tournament. I haven't enjoyed Jake Lee since the match with with Yota Tsuji back in February. I've just completely I'm done with Jake Lee. But now that we know the severity of the ailments and the injuries that he has been fighting through, and understanding that, like, okay, yes, the matches weren't good, but he also was in his best possible way looking for the ability to go out there and perform to the best of his abilities and find ways to work around the injuries that he has and the his inability to perform to the level he had in the past. I don't think it was for a lack of effort or a lack of trying. Were there gimmicks that I'm not a fan of? Yes. Were there as many gimmicks as the rest of the year, through the course of, say, like the New Japan Cup or any of the other feuds he's had this year? No, like he actually toned that stuff down quite a bit this tournament, which I thought was refreshing. I guess I'm going to go just straight D, which I think is a mediocre tournament, mainly because I do feel like he tried in spite of, the fact that he's not capable of doing what he once was able to do. And even then that was dubious as far as ability in the first place.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go for a D minus for Jiggly. Then last but not least, in A block, we got the great Okan also ending the tournament with 6 points, and I think this is an easy F for me. Okan
F minus. Like let's bury this shit. Like put this dude in the fucking.
Yeah, get him in the bin.
Get him in the coffin award.
Yes, put him in the coffin. Wrap him up. It's a wrap for Okan. Yeah, they're super low effort tournament. Yeah, just not good. I don't know what's gotten into this guy. Clearly he's not motivated. Clearly he's just kind of playing up the gimmick and not concerned about having great matches. Yeah, this was a pretty bad tournament for him.
Great Okan, you can get the fuck out of here.
FOH starting early.
We'll move on to the B block.
Yes, B block. Let's start at the top with the B block winner, the Prince, Callum Newman, ended the tournament here with 12 points. And I know Newman was coming in with the tournament with that injury. And, I know there's been a lot of criticism on him, and also with having, some of the low blow finishes and Zane J on the outside and some of the crowd brawling stuff. But I think despite the injuries and despite all shenanigans, I do think that Newman was one of the better guys in the B block if you look at it match by match. Did he have, a Yota Tsuji level tournament? No. But I still think he was like one of the top 5 of guys in the B block that you can count on to put on great matches, especially with someone like Umino being out. And I think a lot of main events kind of slid to Newman because of that. And so I think he, despite having the injury, was able to have some compelling matches. And when he really needed to, obviously turning it on, you look at the semifinal match with Oiwa. And again, I think that's probably his best outing in the tournament, but I think there he kind of showed what he can do in a big time spot like he's been showing all year. So for me, I'm probably going to go B+ for Cal Newman.
You know, A block, as you can see, was the block that didn't have quite as many outings over the course of that final week, but the B block was extremely active. And, you know, last week when people said, who are some of the people that, I don't remember exactly what the question is, but it was something along the lines of those individuals that were somewhat elevated. One of the last names I threw out there was Callum, which I feel like some folks might have heard that, and it was a little bit off the cuff, but, you know, would kind of question that a little bit and be like, you know, Callum, like, he didn't really have the kind of caliber tournament that perhaps you were anticipating from a guy that back in like March, you and I were like, hey, he's amongst the very best in the business right now. And, you know, that didn't pan out through the course of this tournament. You know, this was not something, you know, they talk about like trial by fire. He wasn't a guy that I thought when it was all said and done that I can sit here and be like, yeah, Callum is that fucking dude. But we do know that he was going into this tournament hurt, which I think really did hamper a lot of what he had going on in the tournament. But those final 3 nights, he had that B block final against, or actually, I'm sorry, the final 2 nights, the final 3 nights. He had the match with Aaron Wolf, which I thought that he did a phenomenal job in putting over Aaron Wolf in an unexpected way, form and fashion. That was something that, you know, we weren't sure what that looked like on paper, but the match with Hanare was just incredible. And, you know, the whole story of like, they're both UE's in a weird place, and Hanare being like, you want to be the leader, kid, show me, you know, show me that you're the man. And then obviously, again, we talked about him and Oiwa. Here's the only issue I had. Actually, the match with Oiwa, I didn't love the finish. I loved the match itself, but I believe, didn't it end on a roll up?
I'm blanking right now. Let's see if I can look it up real quick.
No. You know what? I'm actually thinking, you know what? Sorry, my mistake. I was thinking of the match between Uemura and Tsuji, which I thought was really good, but I didn't love the finish of that one. Oiwa ended up beating Callum with the clothesline.
Yeah. He hit
him with the grip.
Yeah, hit him with the grip to get the win. Yep.
I thought that those final 3 outings kind of solidified what up to that point was a little bit of an inconsistent tournament. And then I thought he had a really, really strong finishing effort on those final 3 nights. But one thing that can't be overlooked was there's 2 things. One drawback. Okay. A drawback for Callum. You already mentioned, you know, the kind of reliance on some outside interference, things like that. I think a lot of that was a reliance on that because he's hurt. Mm-hmm. So what I thought was lacking from the tournament, and the thing that is sort of a signature calling card of his, is like he always has outside interference, but he makes up for it in those times with quick explosiveness and high-end, high-flying like physicality, where it's like when he's sort of like a hybrid of Osprey and Jay White, where he selectively decides, okay, I'm going to turn it on right now, and then boom, 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 and he's fucking somebody up.
Yeah.
He couldn't do that in this tournament. If you think about it, Jeremy, he didn't do that once, not even in the best matches they had, not even in the Oiwa or the Zack Sabre match, which speaks to me like that is his calling card as a wrestler, and he didn't do it, which I'm just like, all right, he was fucking hurt. Mm. That's the drawback. The positive part of it, he killed himself every single night of the tournament, and he never took it easy. He took horrendous bumps through the entirety of the tournament, to where I was like, Yeah, that guy's got fucking heart, bro. Like he's about that life. And we've already seen he has the goods, and now we've seen what he's, willing to do for the business when when he's hurt. And he got through a tournament and still had one of the best, point totals and performances of anybody in the block. For me, I'm going to go B on Callum. It's a little untraditional because I don't know that I feel like his, well, actually, I don't know. I'm looking at his cage. There's a lot of green there.
Yeah, like when you think about it, you might be like, yeah, it wasn't that great. But when you actually look match by match, it's like his tournament was better than you think it was. Especially, he was almost kind of like Oiwa, where he peaked high at the end where it mattered. Had that great match with Hanare where he gets that nasty bruise on his back from taking the rampage through the strong style table. And then he goes into the semifinal with Oiwa and has a great semifinal, puts Oiwa over big in that match. So yeah, again, it wasn't a Tsuji. I think Newman is capable of probably having a more Tsuji level tournament. But I think with the injuries, I think that, it had to be toned down a bit. Even though, he was taking crazy bumps, he wasn't able to do some of his more dynamic stuff. But yeah, he still had a very good tournament despite all the negatives we're talking about.
We gave Oiwa an A. And the truth of the matter is, if you're looking night to night, apples to apples, he was more consistent night over night than Oiwa was.
Yeah.
But again, he was also in the semi or main event a lot more of the time. And he never hit the same heights as Oiwa. And I think that that's what's really making the difference for us, is like, he didn't have the lows that Oiwa had, but he didn't have the heights. He was a more consistent performer, but he's going to be, I think he topped out at probably 4.25 and, was probably closer to like 3.5, 3.25 range most nights. So yeah, I think for him, I think B is fitting.
Nice. Let's talk about the Heat Storm. Yuya Uemura, who came in as the second place winner in the block and finished with 12 points.
Well, let me ask you this, Jeremy. Who for you, when it's all said and done and you've kind of tabulated where you finish with things, who's your, and I know that we already kind of talked about MVP for the whole tournament and the A block. For B block, who is your MVP? Is it Uemura?
Yeah, so Uemura is the highest, has the highest average of the B block for me in my match ratings, which when I looked back was a little surprising because I feel like I've been a little bit hard on Yuya and wanting to see more. But when I look at his whole block, including the two final matches, it's like, yeah, he had one of the best tournaments out of the B block. He was one of the guys, especially with Umino being out of the mix, like he was like the number one Reiwa guy that I felt the block kind of fell on his shoulders, and he kind of had to be the front runner of this block. Like he didn't really have a choice to slack because of Umino not being there and Newman being hurt. So I do feel like there was a lot of pressure on him. And yeah, I thought that in a block where there's guys like Ren Narita, who's going to muck it up, you got Oscar, who's good, but he's still learning and getting experience, and someone like Aaron Wolf who's still learning, and then Umino's gone. Like, I feel like this block kind of started falling apart a little bit as the tournament went on, but Uemura was a guy, it was kind of the glue of this block, kept things together, and again was in a lot of those semi-main event, main event positions, and had some really good to great matches throughout the tournament. And again, I think he also peaked high at the end. He had the semifinal against Tsuji, great match, goes in the finals, obviously excellent matchup there against Oiwa, puts Oiwa over there at the end. So yeah, I think Yuya Uemura had a really great G1.
Yeah, he defeated Gabe Kidd on the 11th. And you know what? Actually, the Gabe Kidd match is the match that I was thinking of where I didn't love the finish. I apologize. It wasn't the Tsuji match. I should take that back. I didn't love the Gabe Kidd finish because those guys were like tearing into each other. They have so much history. And then suddenly Yuya kind of just rolled him up and pinned him, which I didn't think was like a fitting finish. And I'm sure is a little bit political. But yeah, he defeated Gabe Kidd on the 11th. He defeated Oscar on the final block night on the 13th. And then had that, fantastic play-in match against Suji, and then lost in the G1 final to Oiwa. So he had a pretty active last week with 4 matches in total. I do think that he peaked fairly high down the stretch. I thought the final 2 matches with Yuya and Suji really delivered, but I thought he kind of front runned in this tournament because I felt like the early matches with like Callum and Zach and Drilla, those were like some of his best matches of the tournament. And then once we got to like the middle with some of like the younger guys, I didn't think that they were really, mind you, I didn't think they were bad at all, but I just didn't think he was having great matches. He was sort of having like a little bit of a sleeper tournament. Like he was, usually third from the top or in the semi, sometimes in the main, and he was having good performances. But, we've kind of talked in the past about our, we're big on Yuya. We've had a lot of praise for him, but we've also had a lot of criticism over the years about not putting things together and, charisma and connection and character. And I didn't feel like this was a guy who was having, in my opinion, the best G1 that he possibly could be having, considering how wide open the field was for someone to go out there and like really connect. But then he turned around in the last week and started having some really fantastic matches. So I felt like he had a really strong beginning, kind of a meandering middle, and then again, a super strong finish. But had he not, like, let's just say hypothetically, he hadn't made it to the play-ins and it just ended with like him and Oscar, I don't think we're talking about the same strength of G1 performance overall. I think for him to really get elevated, he sort of needed those final matches. And for me, I think that's a little surprising for a guy that when we all looked at the totality of things and realized like, okay, Shota Umino's hurt. You look at the field, he's the favored guy in the block. I personally, I agree with you. I feel like the block kind of fell apart a little bit. So it's not entirely his fault, but I felt like he should have been like the guy like Suji, who was just like anchoring and going out there and giving everybody their best match. I didn't think he was doing that. I didn't think he was going. I thought he had some very good matches, but great matches were few and far between. I think the Zach match is probably his best match of the tournament up until the play-ins as far as like block matches. Mm-hmm. Either that or like the Callum. Actually, no. Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's going to be the Zach match. And then that's no surprise because Zach is like probably one of the most prolific G1 competitors in the block, despite what the point totals might tell you. And I also didn't think that Yuya, he didn't do what guys like Sonata and Yuta Weiss and Oiwa were able to do in like garner the crowd entirely on their side. Like when he was presented as like the babyface, he got, appropriate support. Like they weren't turning on him, but they also weren't like life and death for this guy to get through. Mm-hmm. And so much so that I was like, he's probably going to beat Suji in the plans. But I also, if he got beaten by Suji, I wouldn't have been that surprised because he didn't feel like a guy that made the kind of connections you would want for someone that's going into the plans. I think I'm going to go B- on him. I think that there is probably, if you do like the point totals, maybe he edges a little bit above Callum. And especially if you like factor in the finals, and maybe if I factor in the finals, I should bump him up a little bit to a B. but I'm kind of thinking about like the journey of the block. And I just didn't think that if we were just putting block to block, I think Callum beats him. I think if you like excluded the play-ins and the finals, I don't think he's up there anywhere. I don't think he's as high as Callum is.
Yeah, and so for me, I think something that helped him out with his averages were those 2 extra final matches. Did bump him up in my averages. So yeah, without that, he probably would have fell a little bit lower than what he was. So yeah, it's hard because like I want to give credit for the performances in the semifinals against Tsuji and against Oiwa in the finals, but like you mentioned, throughout the tournament, I think again it was like almost the solid hand run.
Yeah.
Like you could count on him to work with everybody, make sure the matches don't fall apart. It's gonna be good, but there wasn't like this investment of excitement. He did not have a Yota Tsuji level run where every match was a banger. So yeah, so I think
he didn't have a compelling tournament.
Yeah.
Like this, like I think Sonata had nowhere near the level of performances night over night that Yuya did, but he had a compelling story, a through line to where when you were finished with it, you're like, yeah, they told a story here. Takeshita didn't necessarily have a story, but he was just excellence every single night. This was a guy who like had one great match, maybe 2 great matches, probably not. Like maybe 1 great match the entirety of the tournament, and he was sort of just there. And then like killed it the final 2 nights, and it's like, man, I don't know, bro. Like when we're talking about the Reiwa guys, Oleg Bolton murdered this guy. Oiwa murdered this guy. And I'm a big supporter of Yuya Uemura. We've been since day one, since he broke into this business, talking about like, yeah, he looks like a fucking future ace. Like, you know what I mean? Like we were there in San Diego when he like picked up his first like win on his excursion, and we were like rejoicing,
jumping up and down with Sam. So
yeah. But it's just like, how many years are we going to sit here and be like, bro, when are you going to like carry yourself like the fucking ace? And when are you going to wrestle like the fucking ace? And again, I'm not trying to take anything away from him and Oiwa. I think that that's my match of the year right now. And it takes 2 to tango, and he deserves every bit of credit that both of those guys put into it. But there was a reason that 100% of that crowd was life and death for Oiwa to win and not Yuya. And Yuya's not a heel. I know that that's the funny thing. I saw a lot of people talk about that match and be like, yeah, Yuya worked heel style. I'm like, where? When? Just because he was a little more dominant in the beginning? I didn't see this guy do anything that was heelish or dickish on any level.
Right. It was just kind of a one-upsmanship. Like he just kind of showed, you can headlock, I can do it too. It wasn't a heel thing. It was like anything you can do, I can do better, kind of a thing, and just kind of trying to prove he's a better wrestler. Had nothing to do with his heel alignment. And so I think that he needs to figure something out, because even again in that final match, as great as it was, the crowd was pro Oiwa and wanted to see Oiwa win. So there's something he needs to figure out with his connection with the crowd, and if he's ever going to truly, step up into that ace level tier. So I think the more we talk about it, I think I'm like, I'll go flat B.
I do think that all the guys in the B block that were Reiwa are working from a disadvantage in the fact that they don't have the established stars from the A block to bounce off of. So that's the advantage that an Oiwa and Oleg Bolton have, is they've got a Goto, they've got a Shingo, a Sonata, they have the established champion over there. They've got Takeshita. So they have a little bit more of a sounding board to work off of to kind of elevate their stock. And the guys in the B block, it's a little bit more sink or swim, because it's like, other than Zach, and obviously Shoto was hurt, you got Gabe there, but like he's the same generation as them. It's like, they were like counted, but that's the thing. The test was, can you be the Suji of this block? And I don't think he delivered in that way personally.
No. Well, so what's your final grade for him?
I'm gonna go B, but I will tell you, Jeremy, if he didn't make it through, if he didn't beat Oscar on that final night, or if he mathematically got eliminated, I think I'm like C+ on the guy, maybe C.
So essentially, the semis and finals were extra credit for him.
They were so much extra credit, and they were so fantastic. And I mean, maybe for oftentimes how a movie ends, how a book ends, what the main event is, leaving on the high note is enough to leave a great taste in people's mouth. To where it's like, yeah, they got the goods. But I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, I don't know, man. I know you were high in the Aaron Wolf match, but I thought that was something like this monumental opportunity, and it just didn't deliver for me that way. I didn't think he was going out there and like him and Hanare. How did he not have an incredible match with Hanare? You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like I love the guy, but when did he break in? 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago? Like, it's time. It's time to be the goods. And you're getting not only did he get beat by Oiwa in this tournament, but like he's getting passed by a guy that's from a previous generation.
Yeah, and if he doesn't step it up, Morishita's going to be on the way back. There's going to be some other guys coming through on the way back that
Oleg Bolton's passing him.
Yeah. So, well, let's move on to the global champion War Ready Gabe Kidd. Also ended his tournament with 12 points.
Yeah, Gabe Kidd. Oh my God, it's weird, bro. Because it's like, how do I account for Gabe Kidd's tournament? His final tournament block night was on the 11th against Yuya. That was a match I wanted to love and I thought was trending so good, and I thought it finished so flat. Gabe's tournament was weird, bro. Like, it was I think that those people, the Mujahideen, I think I've been saying that wrong for a long time, but I sounded it out, and I was like, I think it's Mujahideen. I think I'm saying that right. The anti-AEW crowd, those people that have been so rejecting of, the shtick and the gimmick, and they're getting worked by this guy, and they know they're getting worked, but they don't fucking care and everything like that. I kind of think that they wound up being right when everything was said and done when it comes to Gabe. And the reason I say that is like, did he have any? I think that it's overstated how terrible his tournament was. There were some people that were like, and then, an all-time generationally bad G1 run. And obviously that is such hyperbole. Like, that is not even kind of close to true. But when you grade on the curve and you think about, like, okay, he's the white belt champion, you think about the output of how many great matches he's had through the course of not just this company, but, abroad. And then you look at what he actually did. Was any of it really bad? No. But I don't know personally that I think that he had a single truly great classic match through the entirety of the tournament. And I also don't know that I think that the crowd cares that much about Gabe Kidd in Japan in 2026. Not that matters. He doesn't go here anyways, but they do have their white belt strap on him. I'd probably have to call his tournament, to me, a pretty major disappointment, just considering the level of talent that he is. There were things that he did that popped me. I loved him wearing the gi. I loved his backstage promos. I'm not always one for all the melodrama, but like him calling out Tanahashi and, everything he did on his mic work. Some people don't like the edgelord shit. I enjoy it. I think it's funny, but I don't think I don't think he had a single great match through the course of the tournament. I think he was consistently good, but I'm probably like C plus, B minus on him, considering like how great a wrestler he is and how capable he is of. I know he's a heel. I know he's an outsider. I just think he should have done more. And I think when it all bared out, he's probably like in the 3.5 range. And I don't think that's where you want a guy like, maybe he's lower, like 3.33 repeating. I don't know that that's what you want from a Gabe Kidd.
Yeah, so overall, I had him at a 3.86 average for his whole tournament. And that was, I did not rate the Narita match. I just want NA on that. So that average is based off of 7 matches. And so, yeah, I do think on one hand, it was a little bit of a disappointing tournament from Gabe Kidd, especially if you're looking at, the Gabe Kidd that we could have had, that we saw at New Beginning in Osaka last year with Yota Tsuji. And it's like, and also previous to that, the Kenny Omega match. And it's like, this guy has hit a next level. He's connecting with the audience. He's having these phenomenal matches. Like, this guy can be a star for this promotion. And then, whatever happened, he got hurt and then he leaves and it just all kind of goes downhill from there. And now he's back doing the whole, Shinihan sucks, AEW's #1 thing. Which I feel like it's getting heat in some cities, and I think he's doing the best he can to get that over. But with that, he has to lean in more into like some of the brawling stuff and the using weapons and cheating and all that stuff. And so I think when you look at it, I do think I would say he had a very good tournament. I
should take it back. And I don't mean to cut you off. I should take back. The Hanare match does stand out as a truly great match. Perhaps there are people that didn't love it as much as perhaps we did, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I thought that the match with Hanare did stand out. Yeah,
I think he overall had I think a very good tournament. Yeah, that match with Hanare was probably his best match. The Uemura match, I had a 4.25. I'm trying to see what else that he had that might have been.
See, I thought the Uemura match was trending that way, and then the finish, the flat finish for me, like kind of killed it.
Yeah.
And the opener, I was higher on the opener with Drilla than a lot of other people were, and I thought that was fitting because it, was a fitting preview for the title match that they have coming. I was even higher than a lot of people on the Zach match, but when I look at like the impact that I want a guy like Gabe, who is a star abroad and the #2 titleist in the company, he sort of just it's sort of like he was there, he had the matches, and he doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I'm scrolling back through the match rating. So yeah, there is a lot of 3.5, 3.75. He did have a few peaks, I think, with Hanare, Uemura, Zach. But yeah, he did not come off as a guy that, again, he is a comparison to Yota Tsuji and their whole rivalry. And again, being a secondary champion, being somebody at his skill level, I would expect a Tsuji level tournament from him as well. And he did not do that. But outside of that, maybe if you don't hold him to such a high standard, I still think he did have a very good match. At the end of the day, 3.5, 3.75 are very good matches, but I think it's being graded on the G1 curve where it's like
that is the case. I'm grading it on the G1 curve, and I'm grading it on the Gabe curve because I'm like, bro, he's capable of so much more than what we got from him.
Yeah. And so, yeah, once you think about it, compare it, it's kind of a G1 and what he is capable of, then, yeah, it's a little bit of a disappointment. Yeah, there could have been more. That being said, I would probably go B- with him. I think when you look at just I
think B- is probably accurate.
Yeah, when you look at just a pure star rating average. Like for me, he's the second highest guy in the B block, with Newman like 0.3 behind him. And again, with that B block kind of fell apart a bit until like Uemura, Kidd, and Newman are like my top 3 ranked B block guys. But again, we're saying like how they were all good, but none of them really took it over the top. Well, let's move on now to Sold Out Ren Narita, who ended the tournament with 10 points. And I think this is another easy F for me. Despite also a good point total here and being alive toward the end of the night, I do feel like Narita really stunk it up. And, I've tried to be a Narita defender in the past because I think that people have undersold or don't give enough credit to the New Japan Strong run and even the Son of Strong style run, the Umino tag team. I think that a lot of that stuff gets overshadowed. Yeah, there's a lot of revisionist history when it revolves around him. And I've tried to point back to those things and tell people, like, yeah, this guy is a solid worker. He's just hampered with a bad gimmick. But, I mean, at this point, there's only so much more I can kind of stick my neck out for that guy. And you give the guy so much rope, and it's like, I think he's kind of set in his ways and set in this gimmick and just had a very uninspiring tournament. And like, it was just the whole House of Torture shenanigans and interferences and just not very good matches at all. One of the worst, average ranked guys in the block. And I just felt like his whole tournament was just, I could have done without it.
I think you did a great job summarizing, what was going on there. Are there some potential positive points to be made for Ren? Yeah, I mean, but it's the same thing when it comes to all of his matches. There's going to be these shining glimpses of what he is capable of in the midst of one of the worst matches that you could possibly imagine. It's like, sure, I know this guy's talented. I know he's capable of pulling off complex grappling, type maneuvers in the middle of a shit show. And I know that when he first adopted this character and persona, he was more motivated to still work. And, when he's in there with the champion, when he's in there with Zach and he's the world champion, yeah, he can work. But it's not enough to salvage what was absolutely the worst performance of the B block. And the dirty little secret about Ren Narita is like, he has never been a great G1 performer except for his first year when he was in that Reiwa block with champion Sonata. That was like 2023. Mm-hmm. But this is his third year. He's had 4 G1s. The first one was pretty good. He had some great matches, but it was also a little inconsistent. But 2024, 2025, and now 2026, and this is the worst of them all. They've been pretty bad, truthfully. There might be a couple outliers, but by and large, he's not been a great tournament performer. And, with the fact that his run with Wolf is done, the fact that they brought in a new leader of this group, and he's wearing the bodysuit, and the matches just, they stunk of House of Torture slop. I was almost torn to go like D+ or D-, D, something like that. But like, I kind of think about him and Jake Lee, and it's like one guy was trying, one guy wasn't trying. Bro, he's right there with Great O'Khan. I think I'm going to go F. Yeah,
and comparing him to Jake Lee, one guy is older, one guy has injuries. I feel like Jake Lee had a little bit more of an excuse and still tried somewhat compared to what Jake Lee can do. Where Narita is younger, as far as we know, there's not a bunch of nagging ailments outside the normal kind of wrestling nagging ailments. So yeah, and he just didn't give the effort that you would hope.
How about on August the 2nd, Ren Narita wrestled Yuya in what was probably his best tournament match, 6.18 from the cage match, sickos. Dave gives it 4. The fuck's going on with Dave Meltzer these days, bro?
What night was that?
That was August 2nd. Night 11.
Night 11. I gave that match 3 stars.
Yeah, that's fit. Dave gave it a whole nother. He called it a great match, bro. Dave has lost it.
Oh man. Well, let's move on to Drilla Maloney, and the tournament also at 10 points.
Yeah, so Drilla was basically in a position where going into like he finished his tournament early and didn't have any matches on the final night. We had already talked about he had on the 11th he wrestled Ren Narita. That was essentially a situation where they did the classic, we're going to hit you with all the house torturism, and he's going to play the smart, overcoming babyface who overcomes the odds and outsmarts them and picks up the win in spite of their efforts. And that was fine. But overall, I would say Drilla, to me, was the most elevated individual from the B block. Big wins over, countrymen in Gabe Kidd as well as Callum Newman. I felt like he was the person, and this was already kind of in the works prior to the G1, but that was endearing himself the most to the Japanese and domestic audience. And his work was just really, really elevated through the course of this tournament. Now, I don't know that, like, when you're looking again, he didn't have a lot of like main events. He didn't have a lot of opportunities to go out there and like ply his trade and, have the super lengthy classics that you want to see from someone where you're like, all right, they are on the precipice of being a main eventer, right? He didn't do that, but he had fantastic matches, and there was an excitement, and there was this anticipation and growth and feeling like we are building something here with this guy, and I'm hoping he doesn't leave anytime soon. And I think the audience wants to see him beat Gabe Kidd. And yeah, he gives a shit. And I thought that he killed it in this tournament. I would go, I think B is probably fitting when you just look at like the point totals, but I'm going to go B plus because I feel like there's an intangible with him where he probably had the most exciting and most like gripping trajectory of anybody in the B block, period.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm probably just gonna go the flat B, but I think a lot of that is not all to his doing. Kind of like you mentioned, I feel like had he had more main events, maybe that for me that grade would have been a little bit higher. But I think that he did have a very good tournament. He has the crowd connection, and I feel like that this B is a little bit different compared to like a Gabe Kidd, where it's like, I feel like Gabe should have got higher. I feel like this is a very good spot for Drilla, especially in this block. Again, we talked about how this block kind of fell apart, and I think that Drilla was, again, one of the very good hands in this block and was having exciting matches. And again, there was nothing that was really match of the year kind of blow away level from him in this tournament, but there were a lot of very good, exciting matchups, and I feel like he probably would have ended up being better off being in the A block. I think he would have been elevated a little bit more, had some more great performances had he been in that block and could have faced somebody, like Shingo or Takeshita and Tsuji. We probably would have seen a higher level from him, but despite that, I think that, yeah, he was, again, I think one of the anchors of the B block and a guy that can go out there and have a very good match every night.
All right, bro. You don't have to twist my arm. I'll go B. You convinced me. You sold me on it. Yeah, because when it is all said and done, you look at the point total, basically where we would probably rate the matches. I don't know that there's the strength of classics, but I do feel like the positives are so, they are really weighing strongly for him. And I feel like the B is that's probably the right call.
Let's talk about Zack Sabre Jr. also ending on 10 points. Zack, a very interesting tournament as far as kind of his story. And we speculated last week that, maybe where he ended up had to do with the Shota Umino injury, because obviously guys are probably getting points that they wouldn't have normally got with Umino being in there. And so Zack facing Umino and the only match, and I think that potentially could have thrown stuff off. And he had this weird kind of comeback story where like he ate 4 losses in a row and then went on the comeback trail, but it was a little bit too late, which, I mean, in a 2-man advanced scenario, 10 points could get you through, but you had guys that like in Newman and Uemura and Kidd that were on the path to 10. Narita could have gotten to 10 or could have gotten to 12. Those guys had their way to 12, where Zack essentially like 10 was pretty much the max he could get to and was not going to be able to advance with that. But despite that kind of, odd point total or odd booking for him, still, again, one of the best tournament wrestlers in the world, and very good tournament. Was it a peak Zack Sabre tournament? No. But again, we've talked about all the reasons of this B block and things falling apart. I still think it was a very good tournament for Zack.
Yeah, on August the 11th, he wrestled Hinare and picked up the victory there. And then on the 13th, the final night of block action, he wrestled the never champion Aaron Wolf in what I thought was probably Aaron Wolf's best match of the tournament, and picked up the victory there. So yeah, he finishes with 8 points?
He finished with 10 points.
10 points. Okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure on that. I'm looking at 2 different things, so I'm trying to remember. But I know that you maybe weren't, you didn't have him as high as some other individuals in the tournament, but I got to tell you, Jeremy, like, I don't know. I'm looking at the cage match, and it's like the cage match, the inmates, they don't agree with you. Like they widely have him listed as not only the best performer of the B block, but one of the best performers of the entirety of the G1. Now, I personally wouldn't hold him in the same candle as, the same heights as some of the top A block performers, because I feel like when everything was said and done, the B block had some things that were going against it, but he was the only individual in the block that had 9 matches. And I personally think outside of the match with, like, let's say him and Drilla, which I thought was still pretty good, him and Drilla, and then possibly, then him and Ren Narita, which was basically a nothing match. I think he was close to 4 stars almost every single night. Again, I don't think that this is anywhere close to the best G1s that Zack has ever had. In fact, I would call this for him a down year. Like, this is perhaps, since we've been covering the G1 that includes Zack as a competitor, maybe his worst G1 climax ever. And I still think he's the MVP of the B block. Like, by a pretty, I think he like sleepwalks into it pretty easily personally. I'm going to go B+ on him. I don't think it's enough to get him the A. I don't think that there was enough like tangible investment or interesting things going on, and him starting with such a deficit and never coming back from the deficit kind of puts a hamper on things to where it's like, all right, he just wasn't a player. But I thought he had a better tournament than contemporaries Shingo and Goto over in the A block. I don't know that he had any matches that peaked as high as some of their best matches with Takeshita and Tsuji, but he also didn't have Takeshita and Tsuji to work with.
Right.
I think he was the anchor of the B block. I think he gave almost every single person in the block their best match.
Yeah, I think I would say he blew Goto away. I think he was right on level with Shingo. So yeah, I think I would go B+ on him. And I think for me, when I look at the averages, some things to consider, and as other people look at my averages too, like you mentioned, Zach is the only person that had 9 matches. So his average is based off of 9 matches, where there are a lot of guys in the B block where their average is only going to be based off of 8 matches. And then for me, like I didn't even rate Gabe and Arita, so their averages are only based on 7 matches. And then we talked about Uemura, who had his average jacked up because of both matches. So he had 11 matches that raised his average. So had I maybe just done the block play, Zach would have probably ended up a little bit higher in my rankings for the full standings. So yeah, I think again a guy that he was definitely needed in this block with Umino being out. And there obviously not being a Takeshita in this block, a Tsuji in this block, a Shingo in this block. He was the guy that was really needed to keep this block moving. And so, yeah, I think Zach, B+ sounds good.
I will say this, though, before we move on. As great as Zach was, as needed as he was, as much of an MVP as he was, no classics.
Yeah.
No, you know, that's the difference between him and Shingo and him and Goto, is like they had matches that peaked far higher than he did. He was just like great. He was great consistently every night, but nothing got past, in my opinion, really like that 4 to 4.25 star, level, which is, that's nothing to sneeze at. It's nothing to complain about, but it's like, he also wasn't making the one guy. I feel like, even though he gave everybody like their best match, him and Aaron Wolf, while it might not have been something that was like super duper duper high end, I felt like he gave Aaron perhaps his best match to date. But everyone else, it's not like Zach was going out there and making people. Had great matches, but it's like when he was done with Drilla, when he was done with Oscar and some of these other young guys, him and Callum, granted, we're working against some injuries, but there were some matches like him and Callum. I was like, damn, that should really be something special.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't.
Yeah. And also, I think some of that was due to the injury of Callum, and then also, too, just the story of Zach's tournament as well. But yeah, that should have been something that could have been like a match of the year level contender.
Got to be balanced here. Got to, I don't want to oversing this guy's praises, even though, one of the best wrestlers of all time.
Yeah. So up next, we got one half of tag champs Hanare coming in 8 points. I think Hanare had a very solid tournament, and again, I think due to the Umino loss, he ended up being one of the block leaders for majority of the tournament until the last few nights. And I think he peaked with the Gabe Kidd match. Is probably one of the higher rated matches that I have for him. And yeah, I think he went out there and had a hard hitting slug over tournament that you would expect from him.
Yeah, he had the final 2 matches with Zach and Callum, which he lost both of those matches, were 2 things that really solidified his overall performance, because prior to that, he was having a very good tournament, but like the Gabe Kidd match was the standout. And then he turned around and had 2 matches back to back that I thought were comparable in terms of overall quality. Serviceable hand, but a needed element where, there was this conception and idea that like when the B block was first announced, we're like, oh, it's going to be the bruiser block. A lot of that was based on the fact that Hanare was there.
Mm-hmm.
And truth be told, the B block didn't live up to the lofty expectations. I think Shota being hurt affected that. But the one guy that like embodied that pathos was Hanare. But at the same time, it wasn't like they were, I thought that he brought an element that was like needed, and it was digestible, and it was like very entertaining, but it also wasn't something like when you were said and done, you're like, oh, this guy's racking up the stars. It wasn't like that. Front run, he was a front runner in the beginning, leader, and then once he started facing the stars, kind of fell off. It was an elevation to some degree because this is the best he's ever done in a G1 Climax, but also, in kayfabe, it's not like you can point to a bunch of significant victories that like have a lot of meaning outside of the in the singles division. He still has the tag team belts and the six mans and everything like that. Probably go. I know that it sounds a little demeaning, but I think C+ is very good. So I thought he had a very good tournament. I'm going to go C+.
Yeah, I'm kind of teetering between C+, B- for him. He did have like the Newman match, the Zach match, and the Gabe Kidd match are all like in that above 4 range.
And those were fantastic, and I give him all the credit for it. But then I'm thinking about like the rest of the nights, and I'm like, I don't even. But here's the thing: it's not for a lack of trying. It's not like he was going out there and he was putting in fantastic effort.
Yeah,
maybe B- could be fitting, but I also feel like the B block wasn't totally up to snuff, and.
Yeah, I'll go C. Yeah, I think C+.
I think C+ is fitting.
Yeah.
All the same though, big fan of Hinare, big fan of him. And I feel like maybe next year, if you get him in there with the right guys who are a little more seasoned and are a little bit more about that life, we might be looking at a higher grade. We might even be looking at a higher position. It seems like incrementally, by small increments, he continually progresses in terms of like where the company sees him. And he should be at this point, he should be kind of passing up Great O'Khan. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
I know they're boys and other tag team partners, but I know who's Marty and I know who's Jannetty at this point. Or
who's Sean?
I know who's Sean and I know who's Marty.
Yeah. Well, speaking of tag teams, up next we got one half of Knockout Brothers, Oscar, also ending his tournament at 8 points, his first G1.
Yeah, Oscar's story was like very interesting because like he started so dominant. He kind of reminds me in some ways of like guys that are like on any given night, they can beat anybody, but they're not able to always put it together. It was his first G1. Kind of reminds me of Oleg Boltin in his first couple G1s, where it's like he got some major wins, but he's going to eat losses to the stars. He gets a very respectable point total. He didn't have the same kind of story that his tag team partner Yuto Ice had in the other block, where it's like, he has this thing to overcome. It's sort of like, yeah, we got a blue chipper might be too strong a word because it implies like first ballot, like future legend. And I don't know that that's I'm not saying that that's unobtainable, but I don't know if right now that's what we have with Oscar, but we're not too far off from that. This is a guy who has a lot of pieces to the puzzle when it comes to being a big man in this company that others that came before him, they're just lacking. Plus, if you give him the little bit of extra credit for how entertaining, the commentary, bro, was fucking phenomenal.
You ever seen the whale?
and we hadn't seen too much from him as a singles competitor prior to this tournament, and I thought that he did really well. I thought he acquitted himself in a way that was a lot more superior than what we saw from him in, say, like the New Japan Cup this past year. I thought he connected well with the crowd. I thought he did his job really well. Probably some of the only things I could take draw back from him is like he didn't have a lot of main events. He didn't have a lot of like, it wasn't like he was going out there and having classics, but I think for what was asked of him, he like performed right. Like he passed with flying colors every test that they put in front of him. I don't know. C plus, B minus. I don't know. Where are you with him?
Yeah, I'd probably go C plus. Which again, it's a good for, I think, for him and for his first tournament. Again, like you hit the nail on the head again with like saying it was kind of like Bolton's first G1, where like I feel like Oscar, his matches weren't quite as templated as Bolton's were. I still feel like they kind of had some guardrails on Oscar, and there was only certain things they probably wanted him to do, and those few things he did well. And so yeah, I think he had some very good matches. Again, nothing blow away. There was nothing that really hit the notebook for me when it came to Oscar. But again, I think he, with the Knockout Brothers, has that crowd connection, great on commentary, had some good matches. He's doing some cool power stuff. I think he's kind of, implementing a lot of the Undertaker style playbook. I would like to see some more like Walter style stuff from him. I know he's not quite as like thick as Walter was.
I want to see some Punishment Martinez. I want to see him fucking fly. Not what's his name in WWE?
Damian Priest.
Not Damian Priest. Punishment. I will say this though, the Zach match was pretty great.
Yeah, that was a really good match. So Oscar, I think he's improving and looked very good. And again, I think it's only up from here with him.
I'm going to go, you know what? I've changed my mind. I'm going to go B minus based off this one thing. He defeated Aaron Wolf in a dominant fashion, and he got this idea over that he was able to potentially, if he got you in the wrong position, he could submit you with that fucking sleeper in many different ways. And the crowd, for me, I think a lot of why the ratings I'm giving are based on how crowds are responding to guys. And yes, I agree with you. I think that everything you said there about the templated and about the guardrails, they exist, but I feel like I think the crowd just really, really responded super well to him.
Yeah. Well, Knockout Brothers are super over right now.
Knockout Brothers, they're stars. They're a draw.
Then next up here, Aaron Wolf, also with 8 points, first G1. I know there's a lot of talk about Aaron Wolf, and there's a lot of high expectations and what was his G1 going to look like, especially after the Yoshihashi match to get into this thing. I think there's a lot of eyeballs and a lot of people hoping that he was going to, reel out 9 Yoshihashi level matches.
Yeah, it wasn't quite that. Granted, he didn't wrestle 9 singles matches because there was no Shota Umino. So, we got 8 matches from him. I think it was a good sample size to kind of see what is he bringing to the table? How has he progressed? Again, for me, it's strange, bro. It's always going to be strange when it comes to Aaron Wolf, because we're having a discussion about a guy that is so early in his, he hasn't even been wrestling for a full year. So on the one hand, you kind of want to grade on the, this guy is a literal beginner. So you kind of want to give him some leeway. The thing with Aaron Wolf, though, is he is probably one of the biggest stars, one of the big reasons why the B block happened, because they were, they didn't have the same level of anchorage of star power and drawing ability that the A block had. They were really overloaded there. And they, if you look at the numbers and everything, the A block outperformed the B block, but a lot of the reason the B block performed as well as it did was because people were coming out to see Aaron Wolf. He did have good positions up and down the card throughout the course of this tournament. He's a star, he is a bit of an attraction. And because of the fact that he holds this sort of lofty status and he's got a title, there's this inclination for me to where it's I want to grade on the one, scale, because it's he's a beginner and he's showing so much aptitude and so much growth and everything. But on the other hand, I'm I don't know, bro, you got a fucking title around you. You got gold on you.
Well, yeah,
and
it's a
and you're
conundrum.
one of the biggest stars.
It's a conundrum I mentioned last week where it's like, yeah, the wrestling is not at the level of the push. And, is it his fault?
Or profile.
Yeah. And partly, is it his fault? No, it's like he's a superstar from doing judo, not being a pro wrestler.
Right.
And again, I think there may be some things they could have done differently with him to how they rolled him out and what you want to do with him. But I think for me, I kind of put that to the side. Like, I get that.
Oh shit! You're gonna just grade it. You're gonna grade it just based. I'm looking at stars on a sheet.
Well,
What was your output?
Well, and I mean, for him, it wasn't like he had like a bunch of 4-star matches in this tournament, but consider knowing where he came from to like, this guy is still super green. Right. And people, we saw the Evil match and the Narita matches, and so people thought that he can only do these smoke and mirror matches and that he wasn't, capable of having a regular pro wrestling match. And then I feel like he proved people wrong with the Yoshihashi match, which I think a lot of credit goes to Yoshihashi there. But even throughout this tournament, I think he had very good matches. You can see he's starting to put it together. We're starting to see less kind of thinking in between moves. He has the crowd connection. So I think there's a lot working for him. But with how big his name is, like we mentioned, and how hard the push is, you do want to see the skill, the match level starting to match the push. But I'm at like a C+ for him. Like, I think it was a very...
I think that's fair.
It's a very good tournament. He had a lot of like 3.5 star matches sort of thing, which again, if you're grading on the G1 curve, that's probably a little bit low. But if you're grading on this guy is, green as grass, like, that's pretty good. And he did some cool stuff in the tournament, and I enjoyed this run for him.
I know you popped for that Japanese destroyer.
Oh, yes.
It's funny. It's like I've heard discourse where they're like, he's not doing enough judo. He needs to do more judo, and I'm kind of in that camp a little bit. I like people that I like. Bro, I'm a big fan of judo throws in general. Some of my favorite like MMA fighters are people that, are judo practitioners. And that's something that's actually pretty rare. You would think you would see more of it, but it's few and far between. And then, in street fights, especially in the early days of like YouTube, when it was like the Wild West, you'd see people, I've seen people that have been like, that have said like, oh, the best, the best base for a street fight is Muay Thai. And other people are like, oh, the best base for, a street fight is amateur wrestling. I wholeheartedly believe that the best base for street fighting is judo. You throw a motherfucker on the cement. Now, I don't think anyone should do this because you might actually kill them. But I remember the days of World Star and, the early days of YouTube, and you see someone get fucking tossed in the air and come down and hit the earth. I love that shit. And I would like to see more of that from Aaron Wolf personally. But I've seen some people that are like, hey, we need to see more judo from this guy. And then on the other end of the spectrum, and they're saying that because they didn't like him hitting,
destroyers,
doing all the destroyers and doing all the pro wrestling. And then we see other people are like, he's doing too much judo. He's tossing people. He needs to be pro wrestling. And I'm like, I'm somewhere in the middle. Like I'm okay with him sort of exploring the space and figuring out what works for him. I think the biggest comparison point we're going to have to him, and it's not a 1-for-1, but it's like, and I'm not saying he's going to be this, but like the biggest comparison is like Kurt Angle in the early 2000s. A lot of people don't remember that Kurt Angle wasn't good in his first year. Mm-hmm. I guess he was like technically good.
Yeah, he was fine, but he was not, the wrestling machine that people think of when you think Kurt Angle.
No, Kurt Angle in 2000, which was his like rookie year in WWE. This is not including the work he did like on the Indies and Memphis and in like 1999 and all that. But it's like, yeah, he got a push like right out the gate. He eventually won the title, but it's like throughout the course of 2000, like Kurt Angle wasn't good. I remember him like I know we're going a little bit off the beaten path, but like I remember him winning the title, and then it was sort of like he was a chicken shit heel that was sort of just like barely surviving everybody and like retaining the title. He was like in that Armageddon Hell in a Cell, and he like somehow retained the title, and he's like laid out and he's bloody on the cell. Yeah. It wasn't really until like 2001-ish, like to where he'd really like gotten his feet and started to like perform to the level to where you're like, oh, okay. And that was at the time, like, this guy's a prodigy. Like he has in a very short vacuum of time, like, you know, become one of the best workers in the entire world. I don't know that that's going to happen for Aaron Wolf, but like, I do kind of think that if you're comparing where he's at right now compared to like where Angle was in his first year or first 8 months, he might be further along, you know, and everybody's course, you know, it's not apples to apples, you know, it's totally different, like ecosystem and environment when it comes to, and style of pro wrestling. But, you know, if we're just comparing, I think that he is further along than where Angle was in his first 8 months. That being said, I'm not connecting with Aaron Wolf personally. I want to give him all the credit in the world. I think the match that like I enjoyed the most, I thought the Zack Sabre Jr. match was the best.
Yeah.
I thought him and Zack, they had a really compelling like chemistry. I'm looking forward to them, you know, facing one another again in the future, if and when they do. Sort of feels like that might be what's on the docket for like Wrestle Kingdom. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of guessing that might be like where we're headed in the long term with everything. But it's again, it's the dichotomy. It's like he's a star. He's getting pushed. He's got a high profile. He's also green. I think C+ is very fitting.
Yeah, and for me right now, yeah, I'm giving him a little bit more grace right now on where he's at, but I do think that there will come a point to where it's like, all right, like, so something's gotta give, and so yeah, I hope that the wrestling continues to elevate, and I think, you know, he's miles ahead of where he was in January. Like you mentioned, that Angle comparison is very good, and so if he kind of stays on this track, I think he can be great. And so I think he's,
watch out, Yuya.
Yeah, I mean, it will just take I think he needs the one right match. And yeah, he can easily lap Umar.
I think that's easier said than done, but I was being a little facetious, but yeah, look out.
Then, of course, we had Shota Umino, who had 0 points, had to withdraw due to injury, had the one match with Zack Sabre Jr., so I don't think we need to give him a grade, but, I mean...
I'm going to give him a grade. He deserves a grade. He wrestled a match. So, on the one hand, you know, he had a great match with Zack. I went easy 4 stars on that. Maybe I could have gone 4.25. I don't know. But then he put out duds for the rest of the tournament. 8 fucking duds. I'm gonna go D- on Shota for a guy that was favored, that many people had projected to win this tournament. You know, for him to exit and quit, a fucking quitter, you know, soft.
SAWFT, soft.
Gonna get it. I'm gonna give him credit. He did, in his one match, he had a better tournament than Great O'Khan, Ren Narita, Jake Lee.
Oh man.
But he earned that D-, bro.
Yeah, I'm not gonna give a grade to poor Shota here, but yeah, I mean, yeah, the one match, yeah, outside of 4 stars. So yeah, he had a one notebook match, then he was out of there. So yeah. Well, that's gonna be our G1 Climax 36 report card and final grades there. And kind of G1 related, there's a question that you wanted us to hold off to this week from MJ. And he said, I asked a while back about Tenzon's stylistic influence on NJPW. Not sure if you ever got to it, but it seems as good a time as ever to discuss.
Yeah. It's really hard to explain the importance and influence of Hiroyoshi Tenzan on modern New Japan Pro Wrestling. When we were in the midst, I say we as if like I work for New Japan. When New Japan was in the midst of what many people have like labeled over the years as like the dark ages and the peaks of Inokiism, that third generation of guys, the Yuji Nagata and Tenzan and Kojima and Nakanishi and that entire generation, they were sort of like hamstrung by the older generation and by the style that persisted previous to them, and what 90s heavyweight New Japan Pro Wrestling represented as like strong style, what was exemplified by the Three Musketeers, by Chono Muto and Hashimoto. And truth be told, when we were in the middle of that dark ages, it's not firm as to like who was like the definitive ace of the company. Most people would probably point to Nagata, but that was very much like Kojima left in the early 2000s. He followed Muto to All Japan Pro Wrestling because he didn't like the direction the company was going at becoming like proto MMA and everything like that. And so it sort of became like, yeah, Nagata was like in the forefront in that time in between like Kensuke Sasaki and the eventual shift to Tanahashi. But the man that was like most beloved, the person that was like usually set up as like the top guy in the G1s, the top guy that was like a defender of outsiders for the company, it was Tenzan. And there was sort of like a Daniel Bryan-esque sort of like, he's a lovable underdog sort of persona to Tenzan. And it's interesting because like for most people that came into the company later on and they, in the like 2010s, and they only saw him after his body had like broken down and, he was already past his peak. I mean, bro, like, I don't remember what year it was, 2013, 2014, maybe sometime between 2013 and 2015, Kojima gave up his final G1 slot to allow Tenzan to enter the tournament and have his final run. That's more than 10 years ago. So it's been and that was already him being like, I'm done as an in-ring, as a G1 performer. So it's been a really long time since he actually like his final run at the top of the peak of the company was like 07, 08-ish when he put over Goto in a bloodbath when Goto was returning from excursion. That's how long ago we're talking about this guy being like at the apex. But if you've ever listened to my Tanahashi Ace of the Universe series, or you've ever read any of the transcription of his Aces High series on the NJPW 1972 website, he accounts Tenzan as being the best in-ring performer of all the guys from the third generation. And that's mainly because, yes, he was a big man. Yes, he was, brawny and strong, and he could strike and do the brawling style that has kind of become synonymous with like the Never style. But a lot of people don't realize like he was a high flyer. Like he was fucking fast. He came off the top rope constantly. He did the moonsault. He did the flying headbutt. He did all sorts of like, topes to the outside. He was a guy his size that like shouldn't have been moving and doing the sort of things that he was capable of doing in a modern pro wrestling sense. Nagata and Kojima were really, really, really close to what Puroresu was like. They're very close to like the, the Pillars and to the Musketeers. They're very traditional. He was seen as like the daredevil of his generation, like the guy that was like pushing the barrier and, you know, clearly watching Western wrestling and like being like, nah, fuck that. I'm going to do flips. He wasn't really doing flips, but he was flying.
Yeah.
He was like the guy that was much closer to what Tanahashi and Nakamura and Naito and Ibushi and those guys would push as being the next iteration of what New Japan's house style became. It cost him in the long run, and his body very, very much broke down. That's not to say that he didn't do bloodbaths. That's not to say that he didn't do, you know, the strong strike styles, but he was a hybrid guy. And I think it is very much hopefully when everything is like said and done and accounted for historically, they will understand how influential and important Tenzan was when it comes to the evolution of the house style of New Japan Pro Wrestling, because he was basically the dark, you know, I always account historically as there being a dark ace in New Japan. You know, for Fujinami, there was Riki Choshu, you know, for Hashimoto and Muto, there was Chono. And I think for this guy, I think for Nagata, Tenzan was sort of really the dark ace of the company. The guy, you know, the same way that Naito and Nakamura were for like Tanahashi and Okada. He was the guy that was like, he's kind of the top draw. He's not getting the top push, but he's really the top draw, the most beloved. That was Tenzan. And I think that his influence on future guys like Ishii, like Goto, like, you know, even though he comes from a different company, I think that like the effects of what he laid the groundwork for did influence, you know, power juniors like Shingo. And yeah, it's something that I feel like hopefully is not forgotten in the passage of time, because I know a lot of the work that he did, even though it exists on tape, it's not readily accessible. It's not, you know, from a time period that is very much remembered because of its inaccessibility and everything like that. Hopefully that stuff gets worked out and becomes more available on New Japan World. But Tenzan was the fucking dude. And if you are someone that is more of a fan of like, you know, the more death defying stuff that like Naito and Ibushi and all them were doing, I would highly recommend going back and watching Tenzan, because he might be the most digestible guy of that period. And Tanahashi found, like, in Tanahashi's opinion, he was the best of the bunch from that period.
Yeah, I would say for a lot of fans, I know a lot of new fans kind of came in during that 2016, 2017 era, and if that's your only kind of knowledge of Tenzan going forward, you probably just know him as this kind of old, beaten down, you know, New Japan dad that lost a lot of matches and maybe just only beat young lions. And so I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't go back and watch what he was in his peak. Because yeah, the him just kind of hobbling out and being a New Japan dad doesn't do, you know, justice to what his career was. So that's your only kind of recollection or knowledge of him. Like Josh mentioned, he was so influential during those Dark Ages times, and a lot of his stuff like Kojima and Nagata and the guys around that time was really great, and he was a standout in-ring guy. And we've, you know, reviewed some of his older matches when we were doing recommended match of the week. Yeah, he's a really stellar, hard-hitting worker, and I think, you know, a lot of good stuff is up on NJPW World. Yeah, I would highly recommend, you know, pull up his cage match profile and sort and see what's on World and watch some of that, of the older stuff from him, because yeah, he had a really great career, very hard hitting, and I think a lot of what he's doing, what he did, yeah, has influenced a lot of the style in New Japan, and we're really seeing that now with somebody like Oiwa, who's has taken a lot from him, and even though we've seen like some of the great Okan influence as well. Okan's been somebody that does the chops and the Tenzan tombstone. A lot of people do the Tenzan style suplex, so I think there's a lot of his fingerprints all up and down the roster.
Tenzan fucking rocks.
Yeah. All right, we got some announcements here that came out last week that we'll run through here as we build into what's coming up next. First thing, we got a new young lion that's going to be debuting on this Road to Destruction tour. And it's going to be happening at Korakuen Hall on September 9th. And so this is Yushin Hatazawa. He's a 20-year-old from Hokkaido. He got his start in sumo wrestling in high school and was able to compete at the national level. Then he graduated from high school, got employment as he prepared to join New Japan. He passed the tryouts in 2024 and officially joined the Noge Dojo in April of 2025. So he's standing at 184 centimeters and weighing 95 kilograms. And he's going to be having his debut match against Tatsuya Matsumoto on that Road to Destruction show. So pretty excited to have another young lion in the mix.
So overseas, they use the metric system. What do we use?
We use the I always forget what our system is called. The feet and inches system.
Maybe I'll just put it in as to feet and inches because I'm trying to get the I don't know what it's called. Like we use
the real.
Yeah. So 184 centimeters. That's going to be about a little over 6 feet. Just it's basically 6 feet. And then 95 kilograms. That's about 209. So that's as of now. Now, of course, this is debut. 6 feet. That's pretty tall as far as frame goes, and especially domestically in Japan. So plenty of room and growth in terms of, but as of now, 209 pounds, that is firmly in the camp of junior, but, it is young lion, he's debuting as a lion. It's, going to be quite a few years before we, have any sort of like official designation as to, what his, what wrestling division he works in within New Japan. But yeah, looking forward to this. We're always excited about new young lions. And, it seems like, just a little while ago, we had so many of these guys, starting to make their debuts. And already, we just recently had a Young Lion Cup. So it's like we're kind of like fulfilled in the amount of guys that we have. It's about time that we start sending a few of them off to excursion, which will open up the door for a guy like Hatazawa. But, coming in at 20 years old with the sumo background, it's going to be interesting to see, how he interacts with these senpais before they leave for their excursion. Probably most of the time they do that like early the next year. So we've got a little bit of time for him to, learn the ropes and work with some of these guys.
Yeah. Then as a part of the Road to Destruction tour, they're going to run back Battle Line Hokkaido, which will be a special leg of the tour where they'll be touring throughout the Hokkaido prefecture. And some of the big matches are coming up towards the end of that tour. So September 19th, we're going to have a number one contenders match for the IWGP Tag Team titles. Most Violent Players, Yano and Makabe, will take on the Knockout Brothers of Oscar and Yuto Ice. On September 21st, we're going to have an 8-man tag of Desperado, Mystico, Umino, and Yasuda against Doki, Sho, Shun Skywalker, and Dick Togo. On the 22nd, we're going to have Bishamon, Yo, Taguchi, and Matsumoto against Tsuji, Shingo, Ishimori, Robbie X, and Daiki Nagai of Unbound Company. And then the conclusion of the Battle Line Hokkaido part of the tour is going to see a non-title tag match with Desperado and Mystico versus Sho and Doki, with Despi saying he wants Sho and Doki to prove they should get a title shot before giving them one, so it's a non-title match. But we will have the junior singles title on the line as Yo will defend against Taiji Ishimori after Ishimori pinned him during the last couple of nights of the G1 tour.
So last week I was a little tired on the show. And so I'm so closely, relating the IWGP Tag Team title to KOB that, like, when they started this entire feud with MVP versus KOB, I was like, man, that's like, on the one hand, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. They're doing this feud, but on the other hand, I was like, damn, they've run out of challengers because they're making Most Violent Players like challenge for the IWGP Tag Team titles, totally forgetting in my tiredness that these guys don't have the titles anymore, that it's on United Empire. So now that it's like, oh, this is a match to establish who's going to challenge next, it makes all the sense in the world that it's like, okay, they needed to establish a team for them to beat, meaning KOB is probably going to go over MVP to go on. And now I don't know if they're going to regain the titles, but that's what this whole entire program is about. And like, in my mind, I'm associating with KOB so strongly with those tag titles that I'm just thinking like, yeah, they're still the champions.
Yeah, I get that. So they'll probably end up beating Most Violent Players here and get a rematch of Hanare and Ocon at some point.
I'm looking forward to seeing Shun Skywalker and Mystico interact.
That should be fun, yeah.
Looking forward to see like what the optics and the politics of that are. But I'm not a huge fan of this non-title. I understand in the kayfabe, it's like, okay, you guys are bad guys, we're good guys, and you didn't do anything to earn these titles, so we want to, make you prove yourself. But we know what's going to happen. We know that, the bad guys are going to cheat with House of Torture slop in a match that we're not going to enjoy to establish another match for them to challenge for the titles that we're also not going to enjoy. So whatever we could have done to avoided having to see this match twice would have, in my opinion, been the better way to go. But it is what it is.
Yeah, especially when you have so many limited, probably Mystico dates. It's like, if you're bringing the guy in, like, why not just do a title match and do something special with the guy instead of this kind of random non-title match.
Yeah, so there's that. And then again, there's the aspect where it's like, yeah, you're kind of segregating the juniors to their own card once again. And I'm not going to belabor that discussion. We've had that discussion so many times before. But Yo and Ishimori, it's not really lighting my world on fire. Maybe the crowd will really be into it because Yo's been over this year, and Ishimori, especially now that he's kind of like, he's an unbound guy and he's kind of got that support. I'm sure it'll be good, but I'm not gung-ho about it. I hate to be like negative, Nancy on this, but that's kind of my feelings on it personally.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really invested in this Yo title run. And we've seen, Yo and Ishimori, and I was just thinking about this the other day. I feel like the junior division just feels kind of stale right now. Like, we need like an injection of some fresh talent, some fresh faces. We need some like big stars, and I know
Darby.
People are excited about what Dragunov's gonna do, and I know there's rumors like Gargano might be leaving eventually, and I'm like, I feel like
Ciampa.
we need. I feel like we need those kind of level guys to kind of come in and give this division a little bit of a boost.
We'll see what happens. I mean, it's always a difficult period for the juniors because they're not at the forefront of the company, most of the year. And then, the G1 is occurring. And so they're kind of like taking a little bit of a back seat. My understanding is that Ishimori was picking up quite a few victories on the undercards to kind of establish this title match for what it's worth. But, you always kind of hope that they're planning something that is of some sort of significance to come out of that period where the G1 has dominated the calendar, much in the same way that they do that for the heavyweights coming out of, May and June with the Super Juniors. But they're just not the central focus of the company. So it's sort of like you have this weird lull period. And then again, I'm not high on Yo. And I'm not personally high on Ishimori. Both guys are supremely talented, so they could surprise me. I don't want to be super duper down on it, but I do feel like some fresh blood, like you mentioned, would be beneficial to that division.
Yeah. Then we also got some matches announced for Destruction in Kobe, which will be happening Sunday, September 27th at Kobe World Memorial Hall. Main event's going to be for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship as Yota Tsuji defends against Hiroki Goto. We got the global title on the line as Gabe Kidd defends against Drilla Maloney. The TV title will be on the line as Takeshita defends against Shun Skywalker. Then there will be a special singles match with the returning Jeff Cobb versus Callum Newman. And then there will be a special six-man tag with Taichi, Yuya Uemura, and Aaron Wolf versus Kosei Fujita, Hartley Jackson, and Roy Oiwa. And this is all to build the tease of the Wolf and Fujita never title match that might eventually be coming.
Yeah, so I mean, Destruction in Kobe, this is the first quote unquote major show leading into KOPW, which is the real major show in October. On paper, it's not a bad show whatsoever. There's a lot to sink your teeth into. The Goto Tsuji match, a lot of history there. The most recent G1 match, but feels very much like Tsuji. This is sort of just a get by title defense until we get to the big match, which is him and Oiwa. Mm-hmm. However, these other two title matches are very not only interesting and compelling on paper, but they both feel winnable for challengers and a little bit in doubt, which is something that's always fresh and exciting. Like oftentimes when we go into these types of like B or even C level type shows, it's a foregone conclusion what is going to happen on the cards, but they've cast enough doubt having like Shun come in as like a new leader and a new, entrant into the company. And then, with Gabe being an outsider and Drilla on the ascension, anything's possible. So those two matches are, anyone's game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also think, the Cobb and Newman stuff is interesting because, again, with Cobb kind of back in the picture, you think, well, maybe he should get a win on his return, but then Newman's a guy that's been pushed all year for one world champion. So you have Newman kind of sneak one on him. So I think that match is also kind of unpredictable as well.
I kind of feel like, bro, and I could be wrong here, but I get the sneaking suspicion that like the involvement with Dick Togo with Ghetto
mm-hmm.
in the announcement and the introduction of like Jeff Cobb, that kind of just screams to me like I'm about to turn heel and I'm about to be the handler for Cal Newman.
So where do you think the finger poke of doom is going to happen here?
No. Maybe I'm not explaining it correctly. Ghetto has always been the guy that's been connected to one of like the top heels in the company. And for the first time in a long time, he's like a baby face.
Mm-hmm.
And it just doesn't feel like a good fit. We've talked about how ill-fitting like Unbound Company as a whole is. And I know that like last week or, the whatever week it was, he came out and, he introduced Cobb and he, told Callum to not murder Daikin a guy, which was, we didn't even talk about how ridiculous that was last week. We kind of just glossed over it, but I feel like it's a swerve. I feel like the idea that he's bringing in Cobb and he's the voice of reason and he's just this reasoned man, it just doesn't fit the persona. He's always been tied to a top heel in the company. I get the feeling that him introducing Cobb is a smokescreen for like the reality is he's going to set Cobb up and he's going to join UE
gotcha.
And he's going to be aligned with Callum.
Yeah, that would, I feel like, be traditional Gato. Yeah, align yourself with a top heel.
He's great booker. Not really a guy that's like filled with a lot of unpredictable and fresh new ideas. He's been doing this for a long time and he always just kind of does the same shit a lot of the time, for better or for worse. And so it's like, you look at all the people he's aligned himself up with as a character since the days of Okada, it just feels like Callum is the next logical person for him to attach that character to.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting, yeah, that there is a swerve here. And you think
otherwise, why was he the one that had to introduce Cobb? Why not somebody else? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So yeah, so maybe, you know, there's something where, you know, he quote unquote stops Newman from cheating, but then he actually, you know, it does help Newman win, and it's a whole swerve. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and some people are like, well, why would they do that? That's so like convoluted. And I'm like, it's pro wrestling. They do shit like
bro.
that.
Swerve,
bro.
We had a question from Dark Soldier, said this year's G1 was awesome, and some people are beginning to talk about New Japan again, but it's going to be weird to have to wait until Destruction in Kobe, a full month to wait for a proper full card with stakes. Should they have maybe placed Destruction in the middle of September instead of the end?
No. Two things. Number one, most major like wrestling companies have their major cards spanned about a month out from one another. So, you know, unless you count like weekly episodic television as like major shows, which I don't. Although some shows are more special, but like generally speaking, there's a reason why there's a monthly pay-per-view, and New Japan usually has one, sometimes two major cards, and a month is probably the right amount of time. Plus these guys, I don't know if you know, I Dark Soldier, I don't know, you know, I know you've been watching for a while, but like, bro, Destruction is sometimes rough. These guys are all like recovering from the G1 Climax, and brother, their bodies are broken down by the time September comes around.
Yeah, I kind of get what he's saying with, you know, you want to capitalize on the momentum. But yeah, if you think about it in a traditional Western sense, it's like, yeah, you go month to month with your big, you know, quote unquote pay-per-view style shows. And so I think that cadence makes sense. And like you have to build up the stuff for the show. So you do need this Road to Destruction tour to build up and add heat to these programs. So other news, we kind of talked about it already, but Oiwa, he's going to be officially challenging for the title at Ryogoku at King of Pro Wrestling. So kind of following the pattern of Zack Sabre Jr. and Konosuke Takeshita. And Dark Soldier says, if Oiwa does not win the world title, which is my prediction, what would you have him do in the Tokyo Dome?
My personal prediction, if he doesn't win it there, I think he re-challenges. I think they work a way for him to re-challenge for that title in January.
Yeah, if he doesn't go to the Dome, if he doesn't win the title, I think there's maybe you potentially do a him and Uemura rematch at the Dome.
My feeling on it is this: if this is going to be the first time the guy in October doesn't win the title, it's going to be kind of a disappointing thing. People are going to be upset. I feel like if the match is good enough and if the booking is good enough, you can make up for it by having him win the title in the Tokyo Dome in January.
Yeah, could work. Other news, there's going to be a airport event coming up later this month where New Japan will be running a show at a Hokkaido airport to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the new Chitsu airport from the original version. So there's going to be some matches there. Tsuji, Ishimori, Shingo, and Robbie X versus Goto, Yo, Yoshihashi, and Matsumoto. Oiwa, Hartley Jackson, Vegeta versus Aaron Wolf, Yuya, and Taichi. Naga Brothers and Daiki Nagai versus Most Violent Players and Yasuda. So this is going to be an untelevised event that's happening during the Road to Destruction tour. Then also we got the announced lineup for Lucha Kingdom coming up, the cross-promotional event with New Japan CMLL in November. So we've got Tsuji, Yo, Umino, Desperado, Kushida, Wato, Ishimori, ZSJ, Akira, Doki, Sho, and Shuri being announced for Lucha Kingdom.
She don't go here.
And then the last thing
Quick question, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Who is the current reigning strong women's champion? Who is the current reigning IWGP women's champion?
I think Shuri has one of the belts. I couldn't tell you which one. I've lost track of what's been happening with those titles.
Didn't Alex Windsor win one?
I think so.
Fuck. I don't know who holds those titles.
Bro, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah, sad. Then last thing
Athena
here.
win one?
Did what?
Athena. She won one.
Nah, I don't think so.
No, I'm just playing.
Last thing here, Yota Tsuji was out being an ambassador for New Japan Vietnam Pro Wrestling, and he invited the Vietnam Pro Wrestling champion Aries to join the Noge Dojo. So Tsuji was there, gave him the lion mark shirt, and we have the first Vietnamese wrestler joining the dojo.
I'm sick of all this poaching, bro. This guy's the world champion in Vietnam. You're trying to make him a young lion in the dojo, put on the black boots and do jobs. He's a world champion. Fuck you, Yota Tsuji.
Gotta humble that man. Shave the head.
We're doing to Vietnam what AEW has done to New Japan. Turn them into a feeder league. This is ridiculous. What you need to do, Yota Tsuji, is go to Vietnam and lay them shoulders down for Aries. Make him that way, you know? Do a job. No, I'm just playing. You know, that's again, I know you're about to say this. That closes us out for the show here. I just want to say, on a week with no matches, people thought we were going to have a light show. We gone the full 3 hours, giving you a lot of content, a lot of quality for your time.
Yeah. So I know there's some other questions here. We'll push those off to next week, and then we'll preview some of the early September stuff that's coming on this tour with some of the cards coming up in the
preview. So you're saying as of now, there's no shows to watch between now and
correct.
Jeez, that's nice. Oh, but Jeremy, you will be coming over to the new Strong Style Studios this coming Sunday to watch All In.
Yes,
gonna be grilling. It's gonna be good.
Yeah. Well, that's gonna do it for the show this week. So yeah, next week we'll be back to preview some of the upcoming stuff on the Destruction Tour, cover all this news in the world of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Remember, if you want to watch our show live, listen about ads, you can sign up at patreon.com/KIStrongstyle. You can also make a donation by visiting socialbooks.com/donate and click on the donate button under Keeping a Strong Style logo. Make sure you connect with us on social media on X and Blue Sky. Follow us at KIStrongstyle, at socialbooks, at Jeremy L. Donovan, at YB_Josh and Liger. On Facebook, follow us at facebook.com/socialbooks and the Wrestling Squared Circle Facebook group. On Reddit, on the Pro Black Guy, just Keeping It Strong Style. On YouTube, we are at Social Suplex. You can join our Social Suplex Discord server. Interact with us and other wrestling fans. You can email me, Jeremy, at socialsuplex.com. And check out all the other shows that we have here on the network. One Nation Radio with Rich and James. All Things Elite with Floyd and Austin. Imp's AW Adventure. Wrestling Art with Chris Sings. The AW Match Guide with Cersei and Brown. Tone Talk with Allie and Leah. The Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. And Joshing Around with Tim and Eric. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and review, and we will catch you next week on Keeping a Strong Style, the ace of podcasts.
Ichiban.
Thank you for listening to Keepin' It Strong Style. We'll see you next time.